and your camera will be turned off at the start of the meeting. PAC members who would like to speak throughout the meeting, you can turn your microphone and camera on. Just please identify yourself when you speak. PAC members will also have access to the chat function to post questions or comments during the meeting. Please note there's a drop-down box that indicates who can see your message or question. So you will have the choice of all panelists or specific panel members. If you experience any technical difficulty, please reach out to Samantha Watson by emailing her. Her email is on the slide at swatson@wsbeng.com. And then PAC members, you can also chat Samantha. There'll be a public comment period today at the end of the meeting. We have several people signed up. We'll stay online beyond the allotted meeting end time of 12:30, but we'll briefly interrupt at that time for some closing remarks by Commissioner Daubenberger. We'll then return to the public comments. PAC members, you may leave at this time, or you can stay on to listen to more comments. If you signed up to provide comments, but need to leave early, you can also submit your comments in writing and email them to our project email address at rethinkingI-94project.dot@state.mn.us. And that will also be in the chat. Speakers will have 1 minute to talk. You will be called upon by a member of the project team and asked to unmute yourself. Speaker comments will be summarized in the meeting summary and will not be responded to during this meeting. So with that, I'll turn that to Melissa. Thank you.
Thanks, Renee. Welcome, everyone. As I'm sure you're aware, this is the Rethinking I-94 PAC meeting. We have some new members attending today. Welcome to those who are new to the project. We have a long meeting today. We know this might be even stretching the limits of the human attention span, so we will have a break. I hope you are in a space where you can stretch and hydrate. This won't be the last time you see this information. And as we'll discuss, people will have months to revisit this information. So please be aware that we'll be sharing it in multiple formats as time progresses. Next slide. Just to set us up in space, and for those new to the project, this map illustrates the focus of the Rethinking I-94 area. We're 7.5 miles of 94 between 35W and Highway 55 in Minneapolis to Marion Street in St. Paul. To help us with the information we have to share today, we have several team members presenting for today's meeting. So I want to make sure you get a visual and an introduction to each of us. I am Melissa Barnes. I'm the Rethinking I-94 Project Director, and I'll have each person come through and introduce themselves as I call your name. Commissioner Daubenberger, you'll meet again soon, but do you want to hop on and say hi?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Hello.
Commissioner Daubenberger is our PAC chair, and Renee Reduns.
Good morning. I was just on with the introduction slide. Glad you're all here.
Chair Zelli.
Good morning, everyone. Charlie Zelli. I'm chair of the Metropolitan Council, and it's my honor to be co-chair of this PAC.
Mark Lindberg.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Lindenberg with the Rethinking 94 project team of the project manager.
Connie Sahib Jam.
Yes, good morning. Connie Sahib Jam, and I'm Metro District Engineer.
Jack Corkle.
Jack Corkle with WSB, helping MnDOT with the environmental document. Good morning.
And Jason Jungi.
Jason Jungi, traffic engineer with WSB.
Thank you all. And with that, I will hand it over to our PAC chair, Commissioner Daubenberger.
Thank you, Melissa. And yeah, again, good morning, everyone. Nancy Daubenberger. I'm the MnDOT Commissioner and the chair of the PAC. Very honored to serve as our PAC chair along with Met Council Chair Sally, and really appreciate you all joining us today for this PAC meeting. Glad to be back together to bring you an update on the work we've been doing over the last few months since the last PAC, what we're currently working on, and of course, next steps. And as per usual, we have updates on recent outreach activities. And as Melissa mentioned, we have a very full agenda today because we're going to be going over a lot of information to make sure you have all the information that we want to equip you with. So, and looking forward to a robust discussion. So again, thank you for being on our meeting today. Before we get into it, I'd like to take a moment to congratulate Reconnect Rondo in its efforts to obtain an additional $2 million for their work on the African American Cultural Enterprise District and Community Land Bridge. And that's through the USDOT's Reconnecting Communities Grant Program. So your grant award will make a difference, certainly, in the lives of residents in the Rondo community and along this important corridor. So we look forward to seeing what you and your team bring forward as you continue your important work. Right. So PAC members, we're going to begin by taking a virtual roll call to ensure we have all PAC members identified for those listening into the meeting from the public. So PAC members, please put your name in the chat to let us know you're in attendance. And if you are a staff member who's here on behalf of a PAC member, please put your name in the chat and indicate which PAC member you're representing. Thank you for that. And for all attendees, MnDOT will provide the PAC member roll call in the chat so you can see who's attending. It'll take us a few minutes to gather this information, so please be patient as we check attendance. And just again, grateful for the continued participation and partnership in this project from our PAC members, as well as all those who've been tuning into the PAC meetings. Right, so agenda overview. As you can see, we have several items to cover in today's meeting, so we will be as efficient as possible with our presentation time to leave room for discussion with PAC members. And then we'll also be hosting a verbal public comment period starting at 12:15. And I'm stressing verbal. So the last meeting, for those on, you might recall we had a put in the chat your written public comment. So different today, this is going to be a verbal public comment period. And that's starting at 12:15, as Renee had mentioned. And so again, all PAC members, you're very welcome to stay on for any portion or all of that comment period. But we do understand we are asking for a big chunk of your time. So if people need to get to their next commitment, we understand that. And I also understand that many have expressed interest in commenting, so that could go quite long. And my plan, along with our other MnDOT team members, stay on until everyone has commented. All right, so just some opening remarks, and my co-chair, Met Council Chair Zelli, has a few opening remarks too, but I want to mention our team's going to walk through where we are today, where we're heading over the next year as we work to advance this project and ultimately improve this corridor for those who live, work, and play. Oh, sorry, I thought I heard somebody talking. Maybe not. All right, yeah, we want to improve this corridor for those who live, work, and play around it. And that's why it's important today that we update you on all that's going on and get your thoughts on advancing this project. The project team and the committee's been working on Rethinking I-94 have now reviewed all alternatives based on the evaluation criteria that's been previously shared. And so today we're going to be focusing on the results of that review and talking about MnDOT and FHWA's recommendations for additional study in the next phase of the environmental review process. And PAC members were provided with copies of the alternatives and evaluation criteria in advance of the meeting. So they are also on the project website if you need to look for those. And the intent of sharing these materials was so you could have easy access to them when we're talking about the review of alternatives. We'll go over briefly the alternatives and the evaluation criteria this morning. And we're coming to you today with preliminary recommendations. There's still additional technical review and comment that needs to occur, of course, and our cooperating and participating agencies, which will include other federal agencies as well as local agency staff, will be reviewing the alternatives and in the evaluation memo in February and March, and then MnDOT will report back to the PAC in March or April. So I just want to take a moment and acknowledge that when we get to this part of large monumental projects, in which we need to narrow down our list of alternatives, we often have some folks disappointed who are strongly interested in one particular alternative. And I understand and appreciate the passion that folks are bringing to the table very much. And also hope we can have a respectful dialogue when we disagree. We all want a community that can be more connected, safer for all modes of transportation, that provide Minnesotans with choices about how they are going along or across this corridor. And I want to be very clear that while we abide by a federal process that considers all alternatives fairly, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, creating a more connected community and space for that connection, and increasing options for Minnesotans to bike and walk safely are important priorities for this department and for me personally. So I strongly believe that with the alternatives we're recommending to move forward, we can explore real change in this corridor that looks different from what you see there today. And I'm excited to continue that work together with you. We need you to stay engaged in this so that we can all get to that change together. And with that, I'm going to now turn it over to our Metropolitan Council Chair, Chair Zelli.
Thank you, Commissioner. And oh, there's quite an echo. Oh, well. There it is. Great to see so many familiar faces. Great to see new faces. I can't believe that this process started, I think, nearly or over 10 years. 10 years ago, as commissioner of MnDOT, I issued an apology on behalf of MnDOT for the harms caused by the initial building of I-94. And the harms inflicted on the Rondo community, and obviously this goes well beyond Rondo, but it has certainly taken time and thought, and we really appreciate everybody being engaged along the way. For the past 5 years, I've had the honor to represent the Metropolitan Council on this PAC, and through this process with a slightly different hat, but some of the same work. You know, if it takes 10 years to get to this point, there's probably a lot more time ahead. But generational change and these major investments do take time. So I know at times that seems frustrating, but I appreciate everybody continuing to show up and show interest. But having said that, I think we're really at a really important point in this whole study, this whole effort, and the idea of narrowing down alternatives is something that is always tricky, but clearly important to do. We need to do that, but that doesn't and shouldn't shut off voices. We want to continue to be hearing from all of you, from community, from voices that are impacted. So I really appreciate this PAC. I appreciate policymakers having honest and candid conversations. I think that if you participate and certainly encourage those who are impacted, who have visions, we certainly want to make sure that we get that reaction to every alternative. Important to note that kind of wearing my Met Council hat, we have a perspective very broadly thinking as the Metropolitan Planning Organization. And that is a role where we consider many different impacts. In fact, next month, just note that Met Council will be voting and approving on a 2050 regional plan. That's a plan that happens every 10 years, really guides a lot of the development across the metro. The kind of early drafts, and I suspect that we will continue and vote on many of the goals and aspirations that were in the past plan, including equity and inclusion. But one thing that will be new are goals associated with kind of recognizing past harms and looking for ways to repair past harms. So that's different, nuanced, and important. In fact, we are starting a 2-year process study, kind of looking at the system level of where efforts taken to the ways that we can kind of identify what possible mitigations, what possible resolutions there might be for past harms, really across the metro in a number of areas. And I think in that work over the next 2 years, we'll invite you, and in fact, I think it'll be informed by a lot of the conversations that we're hearing as part of the I-94 process. I guess I'll just close by saying I respect and appreciate that MnDOT and Federal Highway Administration are the final decision makers of this process. But I also know that as Met Council, we are a full partner, and in fact, maybe even leading part of the transit perspectives as we think about the I-94 area. There's an opportunity with our Gold Line extension that'll start operating on the I-94 as it's currently configured as early as 2027. The Gold Line is opening in March, but we will extend it all the way to Minneapolis. That is something I hope that will continue momentum thinking about transit in this corridor, but it certainly provides flexibility and how we might look at different alternatives that include transit might be ways of thinking about the Gold Line extension as adaptable and incorporated in whatever alternative we end up going to. So with that, I'm really looking forward to the next phase and looking forward to learning more and listening through this process today. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair Sally. Appreciate your comments and your participation, your continued participation in this work. All right, and so I'll just go on to some updates from our last meeting. So during the last meeting, we talked about the role of the PAC, and MnDOT appreciates all Rethinking I-94 PAC members and all you've done to provide feedback on this very important project. And just as a reminder, the PAC helps to guide policy and funding decisions, review recommendations from project staff and advisory committees, aid and act as conduit in community engagement, and identify important issues. And in our last PAC meeting, questions were raised about the possibility of PAC members voting on certain aspects of the Rethinking I-94 project. PAC members received a letter on how MnDOT was going to approach its PAC meetings. And while the PAC is a vital part of our project process, the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA guidelines, identify MnDOT and FHWA as decision makers on the Rethinking I-94 process, and final decisions must be made by MnDOT and FHWA. But we greatly value PAC members' perspectives, and there are a variety of ways for PAC members to make their views known on this project, including, but not limited to, of course, robust input and discussions in these PAC meetings, the municipal consent process where cities vote on certain construction projects in their communities, multiple ways to submit official comments through the NEPA process, and examples of previous forms of communication from elected officials are St. Paul, Minneapolis Council's past resolutions regarding what they'd like to see on Rethinking I-94. And a subsection of the PAC and others submitted a letter to MnDOT outlining their thoughts and concerns. So MnDOT's keeping role of all its committees, including the PAC, as an advisory committee, and MnDOT and FHWA have and will continue to incorporate comments and the input that you, our committee members, provide. So when a project or projects are ultimately identified, MnDOT will request municipal consent if it's needed. And PAC members have been heard by MnDOT. Many comments have been incorporated and changes have been made based on your input, as well as input from the community and our community members. And as always, we are happy to meet with members of the PAC and other stakeholders, of course, even outside of this PAC meeting. We welcome the chance to engage with you during PAC meetings and outside of the PAC meetings. So a little on community participation. We have incorporated, as we noted earlier, a public comment period that's verbal as part of this meeting at the request of the PAC. This information was included in the letter sent to PAC members on behalf of the project team. And those wishing to have an opportunity to do so at the end of the meeting can do so. And PAC members, as I mentioned, welcome to stay longer than 12:30. When the official meeting time ends, if you need to leave, we completely understand, but welcome to stay until all commenters have commented. And MnDOT will also accept written comments from those who did not wish to speak or need to leave the meeting before they have the chance to do so. So we're asking agencies and organizations to please limit themselves to one speaker for the organization, so that way we could hear from a variety of interests today. But comments can be submitted to the project team at the address that we have on the slide here. And air quality was a topic of our last meeting too. There was a discussion at the last meeting on how air quality would be studied. And there is a technical working group made up of experts from MnDOT, FHWA, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and the Met Council that discusses air quality analysis. PAC members requested that members of the public be invited to participate in meetings about air quality. And MnDOT will create opportunities for the public to participate in air quality analyses in the Tier 1 environmental impact statement phase of the environmental review process, when more detailed work will be completed for the alternatives. And we'll have updates when we get to that Tier 1 phase. So any comments or questions at this point? And I see.
I think Commissioner Conley. Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner Conley.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Commissioner Angela Conley, Hennepin County Commissioner for District 4. My district is bordered by the project area, and as I support and represent many constituents in the Cedar Riverside area, and wanted to just really pull out something that Chair Zelli mentioned about moving into a period where you all are really looking at past harms. And I think that's really important that happens, because one of the things that comes with an apology is the action behind it. And so identifying past harms is going to be really important. One of the things that I want to just add in terms of how it relates to where we are currently is that in 1956, Congress approved the Federal Highway Act of 1956. And what was important about that at the time was that we were moving people through cities. And the biggest thing was that we go right through them. And what ended up happening, as you all know, is neighborhoods were decimated that were primarily Black and Brown communities. And you also mentioned Rondo, and I think that Governor Walz is quoted as saying that it wasn't just a physical structure. This is something that ripped who we were as Minnesotans, and it was an indiscriminate act that said this community doesn't even matter. And it was a convenient place to put a highway so we could cross over the place and go from the city to the suburbs. So one of the things about past harm that I think that should be on your minds as you move into that direction is that we are looking at federal policy that was initially designed to skirt the civil rights movement, which was gaining momentum at the time. In fact, Congress, federal courts began to outlaw racist housing tactics like restrictive housing covenants, which prevented Black residents from buying into white neighborhoods, and redlining. I think we're all familiar with what redlining is, which was a longstanding governmental zoning practices that just denied federally insured home loans to anyone living in a designated Black community. So what happened was anxiety rose up within the Federal Highway Administration about the prospect of integrated neighborhoods. And so highway construction offered a solution to that. And that was substantial physical barriers that could be used to reinforce these racially determined neighborhood boundaries. And so what the federal government did was predicated highway funding on state and cities' promises to use it in just that fashion. And so you can see that even today in 2025, as you look at one side of I-94 in the project area along Cedar Riverside and in the Rondo community, and you look at the other. Now, I live about 5 blocks from 35W, and Southwest Minneapolis on the west side of the freeway looks a lot different than it does in the historically Black Bryant neighborhood where I live to the east of 35. So you can still physically see how freeways took the role that segregationist redlining did when it was outlawed. So I want to make that really clear that we are in a place right now through rethinking this project that recognizing and identifying past harms like that is something that we could move quicker than the 2 years from now, or something new that I think is important. But it should be incorporated into this now. So I want to just appreciate that Chair Zelle brought up that recognizing past harms is something that you heard and something that you want to move forward to, and that's something that you'll be seeking our input in over the next 2 years. But it's absolutely something that could be used in any new rethinking of highway infrastructure, given what it was rooted and based out of. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Conley, for those thoughts on past harms, important points. Connie, do you want to call the next? I think we have a few hands up. So you want to go ahead and call on whoever you saw put the next hand up?
Yes, I think it's Councilmember Wansley.
Go ahead, Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you. I just also want to echo sentiments raised by Commissioner Conley, and I'm actually here with a number of my constituents behind me who I think, as you all are aware, are very supportive of us continuing the study and advancement of the at-grade/boulevard option. So I know we'll dive into that more throughout this meeting, but I did want to revisit the point that was raised around the role of the PAC in the bylaws, specifically these NEPA guidelines, because I think this is going to be continuously a point that we're going to revisit throughout our time in talking about the highway and what our role is in relating to this process. You mentioned that essentially, the NEPA guidelines relegates decision-making authority amongst MnDOT. And I think from my understanding, in many of the advisory boards that I have been a part of, and probably many other elected officials on this call, who they've probably been a part of these, and even in our own respective governments, where we have advisory boards and commissions, that's essentially what they are. They are advisory boards. But even within that capacity, they still have the ability to take formal positions. They have the ability to vote and have exchange ideas. In fact, I've never been on a board or advisory body where we couldn't even use basic Robert Rules of Order. And that's essentially what we can't even do in this space, which is wild to me. And the fact that we aren't even able to take formal positions or have the opportunity to vote on positions in this space is very concerning. And in many ways, it feels as if we aren't able to advocate fully for the interests and demands of our constituents that allows for this process to continuously be staff-led as opposed to actually community-led, that you all keep saying you really want this process to be rooted in. And I don't know how we really flip that if there is a resistance to it. And it kind of feels like a cop-out that we're going to just refer to the NEPA guidelines, when I know it's very possible that as a PAC board, us as members should be able to take positions. We should be able to bring motions. Staff should be able to support in their, full-time paid capacity. And you all absolutely can still retain your ultimate decision-making authority. And we can take votes and relay our recommendations to you for your consideration, but at least we will have the opportunity to take that formal position. And the reason why we're having to do all these other things, pass resolutions and budget amendments and all those things, is because we aren't able to do that actual formal action work in the very spaces where we're supposed to be able to in this very committee. And you're constantly telling us that you value our input, you value our community's input, and it does not feel that way. It feels very disingenuous. It feels very superficial. And I don't think you really reverse that. Of course, one, by dismissing the at-grade option this early on, but also you don't do that by essentially censoring the PAC process neither, and limiting our ability as members to truly engage and have a very thoughtful process with one another who represents thousands of residents who's going to be impacted by this corridor. And for us to actually hash out what is our recommendations, how do we see ourselves relating to this without having such a tremendous amount of just staff micromanaging us in this process. So I do think we need to revisit the bylaws piece, we have to. And I don't feel like there's any state statute that says we have to be hamstrung by these NEPA guidelines that says that we can't take positions. I didn't hear that in your comments. You can still do decision-making authority, and this body should still be able to make motions and take positions like any other normal body, advisory body, and be able to do fun things like parliamentarian rules like Robert Rules of Order. So I at least wanted to relay that for the public record.
Thank you, Councilmember Wansley. Appreciate your comments and thoughts on, you know, what this PAC could be. So we will take that under advisement. Appreciate your input on that. And Connie, I will let you call on.
Yes, I saw a couple of hands, but they disappeared. I know Senator Fateh, I saw your hand up for a second. Would love to hear from you.
Yes, thank you so much. I did put my hand down because Robin hit everything right on the head. So I appreciate my sister for her comments. I just wanted to follow up a little bit because I do agree with Robin on how, I guess I'm trying to see how to word my question. How is the advice of the of all of us being assessed if there's no formal votes being taken? I guess that's my question.
Thank you for that question, Senator Fateh. Yes, and so we are keeping track of notes and with all the discussions that are happening in this PAC meeting, as well as any other, you know, engagement and communication that you provide us to, and that is influencing, you know, our project development and how we move it forward, even without votes. Just understanding where you're at with things, the questions you've had, and the thoughts you share on the project, and what you're hearing from your community members.
Thanks, Commissioner. Ms. Jones.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for this opportunity. And I feel like a big newbie here, jumping into something that's been happening for a long time. But I do want to echo Councilmember Wansley and Senator Fateh. I've also sat on commissions and committees, and yeah, if we're an advisory committee, I think, you know, we can still be advisory, but having a collective recommendation is valuable.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you. Sorry about that. I was having trouble with my mute button. Yeah, thank you for that comment too. I am not seeing or hearing anything.
Either.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then I think that brings us on to the schedule part of our updates for today. And so with that, I will turn it over to Mark Lindeberg.
Thank you, Commissioner Dobbenberger. Excuse me. I just wanted to remind this group about exactly where we are in the overall project schedule. This is helpful context so you can see where we have been and what we have left to do. You know, thus far, MnDOT has conducted substantial public engagement and outreach. We have heard community interests and desires for things outside of transportation. We have identified numerous transportation needs on I-94 related to walkability and bikeability, infrastructure condition, safety, and mobility. We've prepared and revised guiding documents based upon public feedback, and that includes our purpose and need statement, our statement of goals, and our evaluation criteria. We've collected ideas on how I-94 could be improved for all modes of transportation. We've conducted transit and traffic studies, developed alternatives that combined ideas for roadways and transit, and made a commitment to improve walking, biking, and rolling modes within the corridor. Following the alternatives evaluation, the project team will prepare a scoping document, draft scoping decision document, Quite frequently, you may see that as an SD/DSDD, just a lot of S and Ds there. Just wanted to point that out. So if you see the acronym, you know what it is. And that scoping document will identify a range of alternatives to consider in the Tier 1 environmental impact statement. The document will also go through community reviews and edits. An official scoping document, draft scoping decision document, will be published for public review and comment. Comments will then be reviewed and changes to the document will be made by the project team. It's going to take about a year to complete the process from where we are today in getting through that scoping document and the public comment period and making those revisions. And just understand that this schedule is flexible and will be adjusted as we're going forward. And we still have many conversations that need to occur with the public and with our agency partners. We go to the next slide. And again, we are in the scoping document stage, and it does not select the preferred alternative. It eliminates alternatives that don't meet our purpose and need, and it presents a reasonable range of alternatives that should move forward into the Tier 1 EIS. The Tier 1 EIS process will select the roadway type and lane configuration. It will propose interchange or intersection modifications and identify pedestrian and bicycle improvement opportunities. This document will outline a program of projects setting the vision for the corridor and the necessary projects to achieve it. The Tier 1 EIS process is expected to take about 3 or so years to complete. The Tier 2, the final stage, it will produce the environmental documents that are needed for the construction of each of the projects identified within the Tier 1 EIS, detailing project designs, impacts, and mitigation measures. These projects currently lack funding and construction dates. It is during this Tier 2 stage where municipal consent would be obtained if it is needed. And with that, are there questions on the schedule?
Yes, I see Representative Senso-Mura. Welcome.
Thank you. Can you explain when I heard you just say that municipal consent will be obtained if needed? Can you explain the situations in which you will have to get municipal consent versus when you don't?
Sure. Municipal consent is needed right when we need to acquire right of way, or if we are changing access, or we are increasing capacity on the roadways.
Yeah, that is a state law that was passed several years ago. Basically, when you get to a point you're ready to build a project, and as Mark said, if it impacts capacity in any way, decrease or increase, and right away, and so that's when we go to work with the municipalities who are impacted by it to get the municipal consent, similar to what's going on just happened on the Blue Line project.
And just to be clear, Minneapolis and St. Paul are the only municipalities that have the potential to get consent for this specific project. Is that right?
That is correct.
And Mark, could you add to at what point, a little more detail on what point we would go for that with a project that meets the, the triggers that you had mentioned in relationship to the environmental process?
Sure. So as I mentioned, we're in scoping now. Then we're going to move into the Tier 1 EIS. That's going to take roughly 3 years or so to get through. And that Tier 1 would identify a program of projects and most likely the staging for the order of the projects. So then after that, 3 year or so time frame, As long as MnDOT would have funding to start looking at a project, we would start into that tier 2, which is essentially the final design stages of it. And it would be within early parts of that tier 2 that we would be getting a final document ready to go to our partners, the cities, for the municipal consent. And again, that would be on the first project that we start to work on. It isn't likely that, in my opinion, right now, knowing what I know, that I don't think we would go and look for municipal consent on the whole corridor at once. But you know, those things could change as we learn more about the staging and what the projects are. So there's a little wiggle room there, but you know, we're probably, you know, we're minimum of 5 years away from that point.
Thanks, Mark. And yeah, so that's what I was hoping you'd address is about where in the environmental process. So a city would be presented with that environmental document. And then also, I believe we provide the what we call more of an internal description for MnDOT, but a geometric layout where we show the configuration of what's being proposed to be built, as well as what we call construction limits to show, you know, where slopes would touch down and kind of the limits of impacts for the project. So a city would have that at that point as well. So that's, as Mark described, quite a ways out.
Ms. Jones, you have a hand up.
Yes, thank you. Just confirming that I understand what was just said about municipal consent. So there could be instances where there's municipal consent asked for. So say there's an interchange, you designed it, and like this interchange is going to be changing in St. Paul, and so you want to ask for consent there, but 2 years later, you'll need to ask for municipal consent in another place in St. Paul, and then it could be a year later, and that there's a municipal consent asked for in Minneapolis. Is that a correct understanding?
It could go that way, yes. As we look at our program of projects coming out of the tier 1 and that staging, and depending upon how our funding comes, we would have to look at that sequencing, and we would go to the cities to get municipal consent for each of those projects. And I did say, you know, it is possible that we look at the whole St. Paul section, and if we know what that looks like, we might try to lay that whole thing out and get municipal consent just one time. But we haven't really talked that much about that opportunity yet, knowing that we're still in scoping and we haven't gotten to that sequencing phase of it as of yet. Does that make sense?
I guess I was just kind of surprised to hear that, you know, there wouldn't be a full like general layout, and that you would be asking for full consent of the full layout at one time.
And we could do that. We could certainly look at that, or even do two, one for St. Paul, one for Minneapolis. We have to look at the phasing, look at the process of that. Do we have time? When we start looking at that first project, do we have the time to develop the layout for the whole corridor? That tier 1 develops a footprint. It doesn't nail down all the exact details. And so when we develop the geometric layout that Commissioner Daubenberger mentioned, that we bring to the cities and that we use that for our municipal consent, we have to know construction limits. We have to know each of the interchange designs. And we might be, we might be starting at Snelling Avenue as our first project. And a second project may be, over at Dale, in the Dale area, but that might not happen for 3 years. So as we're looking at the Snelling area, we maybe don't have enough information, and we haven't worked out the details of the Dale area. So submitting one layout could be complicated. but it would simplify other things. So it's a subject, an issue, a topic that we certainly need to look at as we progress as to what the best option for us is. We just don't have that information yet.
Yeah, the municipal consent is a state law and specific to the city that's impacted. So if it is a project on Dale, in this case, I don't think City of Minneapolis would be part of that process. It's a St. Paul deal, so it's very specific that the law is. So,
and Connie, and I'll just add to that too. So yeah, the law is specific and that addresses projects, but prior to getting to that point where we have a specific project we're building, that's why it's so important to us to have this kind of engagement, so that as we're looking at the entire corridor and what that will look like in the future, that we have the input of the communities along the way.
Mm-hmm. Councilmember Wansley.
Yeah, I actually wanted to second that piece of why it is actually so important for us to spend this time and making sure we're evaluating all of the options before us, because from my experience, by the time we are evaluating, or having to consider municipal consent, essentially the project is basically final. So I think as much as we could take this time to be thoughtful and not dismissive, especially of community advocated proposals like what we're about to lean heavily into in our next discussion, I think the better, so that the municipal consent process can also move smoothly. But I think that is also the baseline of this conversation. But I just want to flag that too, because I'm not sure if I believe Representative Jones and Senator Muir, you probably have had experience with that, but I just wanted to note again, like by the time we got to, having to sign over consent, like things are finalized essentially.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a little bit of difference between, I think what Representative Jones was talking about, maybe having lack of a better term, municipal consent for a concept, for the whole thing. And there's no such process written in the state, and it is in the federal process, which is what we're working on. The municipal consent laws we're talking about is when you have money, when you're going to build something, and how you're going to impact the specific community. So we wouldn't be doing that now. Okay, next I see Councilmember Jalali. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Just as we're talking through the process points and the way that our communities are going to register our positions, I wanted to add my voice to people in the chat and my colleagues in St. Paul and Minneapolis that I think that this advisory body being able to formally vote on recommendations and on different gradations that lead up to those more legally required serious major municipal actions is important. I think it's important for the public record. I think it's important to really air the merits of the paths that are being considered. And it doesn't feel sufficient to me right now that, our municipality, for example, St. Paul, we are responsible for constituents along a major portion of the scope of this project. And we need to be able to be clearly registered in a way that actually documents for the public record. And so having spent many, many hours in this process as one of the people who has been on this advisory board and this PAC, I would say probably the longest among a lot of my colleagues on here. I'm troubled that at this stage, we don't have clear mechanisms for registering where the members of the PAC land on different portions and how that can guide what we're doing. So I just want to say all that to say, I think those pieces help build up to stronger, more informed actions down the road for decisions. And I really think we need to look at how this body can take votes along the way and register where we stand. So just want to add my voice to those in the chat and also on the call. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Jones?
Yes, thanks. I think you opened up an important distinction around the municipal consent, about one being around the concept plan versus these very particular things that are required in law. And I think particularly, you know, with the desire to have a very community engaged and community led process, that getting buy-in from both cities on the concept plan will lead to a much stronger and successful outcome. And so not waiting for like that official municipal consent, but making some type of mechanism for a new pathway. And maybe it's not a formally required one for municipal consent, but getting that municipal consent of the concept would be valuable.
Thanks, Representative Jones. Yeah. And Councilmember Jalali. Duly noted. Any other questions or comments that you're seeing hands for, Connie?
No, I don't anymore. Thanks for the great conversation.
Yes, thank you so much. I guess with that, I am going to turn it over to Renee Reduns to give us an update on engagement.
Thank you, Mark. So I'm Renee Reduns. I work on the communications and engagement for this project. Just wanted to give you a quick update on the youth leadership program we discussed with you at our November meeting. We went to a few schools along the corridor and tabled during the lunch hour, recruited people. The email was sent wide and far. And if you did any work on getting the word out about the program, we thank you, because we got 60 applicants, which was wonderful to see. We've evaluated those applications and had selected 20 different students to participate, and we've notified them earlier this week. So hopefully they'll all respond and we'll get the program started in February. So we're also really excited that we had a lot of different schools being represented. So from Central and Highland and St. Paul to South and Washburn and Minneapolis, and a lot of other, charter schools, Mung College Prep Academy, Hope Community Academy, Metro Heights Academy, Avalon. All the students are in 10th and 11th grade, with the exception of one who is in 9th grade, who seems very passionate about transportation. So, and again, the purpose of this program is to give students an opportunity to explore career paths in the transportation sector, meet and listen to presentations by transportation subject matter experts and professionals. We're going to have a tour for them. They're going to choose an independent project to work on and provide a presentation to MnDOT leadership at the end of the session on March 25th, all within the context of the Rethinking I-94 process as a foundation, and then they're going to be reimbursed for their time. So again, that goes from February 4th to March 25th. If you're interested in attending that last kind of celebration on the 25th, we're happy to forward you that invite as well, which will be held at Rondo Library. And then the next slide. You also may recall that we've launched the Community Voices Initiative. We've shared about 7 community member stories through the initiative through our social media and GovD newsletter. We have a few more stories we're going to share in February and March, and then we're going to transition to phase 2 of Community Voices, where we're going to focus on sharing how these different travel experiences may differ for the members we talked with. With the alternatives that we're evaluating. And then we're also going to seek out some additional community voices and record video clips to share their perspectives. And so just as a reminder, the purpose was really to highlight the diverse range of travel behaviors and experiences, perspectives of community members that they have on the future of 94, was to add a little bit of a human side to the very technical nature of this process and raise awareness for the project. And then in terms of an update on our engagement, since November, we, again, attended those schools to recruit for the youth leadership program. We've been meeting with PAC members one-on-one, and we've been spending a lot of time preparing for the content on a new kind of online story map, which we're going to provide a link to that later in the presentation. For upcoming engagement in the next month or two, we have a community leaders meeting scheduled on Wednesday, the 22nd, next week at St. Paul College. The project team is also going to be meeting with the City of Minneapolis City Council Climate and Infrastructure Committee on February 20th. We're presenting to the Minnesota Trucking Association at their quarterly meeting on February 20th, or possibly in May. And then, of course, we'll be getting the youth leadership program running, and then busy scheduling our upcoming engagement for the spring into the fall, where we're going to be, holding that formal public comment period. So this is going to be a very robust engagement effort, similar to when we released the alternatives in 2023. And then the next slide, Mark. or not Mark, but Jack. In the spring and into the summer, we're going to be out in the community sharing these evaluation results and recommendations, as well as answering questions that people have. And we're going to be sharing the scoping document, the draft scoping decision document in late fall 2025, early winter 2026. And there'll be an official public comment period at that time for that document. So all public comments we will get will be reviewed and considered. The public comment that we get during the public comment period will be documented in that scoping decision document. So if anyone has heard that the public comment period starts now and it lasts only the next 30 days, that was misinformation and is not correct. We'll be taking public comment on these alternative recommendations up until the scoping document, draft scoping decision document is shared. So just want to be clear on that. In terms of upcoming engagement that we do plan, we have a lot of different tools that we're using. We're going to be using videos, zines, little small visual magazines that can reach kind of broader audiences. We'll have interactive boards at the in-person meetings, one-pagers. We have our online story map. We'll have a pamphlet kind of directing people to that story map. We'll be attending lots of neighborhood and stakeholder meetings and giving presentations. We'll be attending community events, and we'll be holding open houses for the public, online and in person. And there are many stakeholders and groups, as you're aware, that we engaged with last summer that we're going to be routing back to again, giving them updates. I don't need to list them all, but if you are interested, we will be putting all of these upcoming engagement events in our Gov Delivery project newsletter, so you can be aware of them and you can attend if you're interested. And with that, if there are any questions, we can handle those. Otherwise, I'll turn it to Jack to talk about the alternatives being considered.
Yeah, thanks. I do see a couple hands up. I do want to add how excited I am with the that we're doing this youth program. I had the pleasure of meeting a young man who happened to send the letter. As you know, we get a lot of letters, concerns either way, and for, against, and all of that. And he wrote one, and he wrote it from the heart. And I ended up inviting him over. He came over and met with us, and a 16-year-old sophomore from Washburn. I won't mention his name, but he volunteers for the advocacy groups. Those who were, a lot of them were sitting behind Council Member Wansley. And I really love the passion and the extremely smart young man, 16-year-old. I'm thinking back to what I was doing when I was 16. So I'm impressed, and I'm really excited about, he was really impressed with our traffic management center here. So, but anyway, it's great to see. I hope everybody continues to do that. And we love people to get involved, especially at a young age. So with that, Ms. Bowie. Did I pronounce that right?
Oh, excuse me. It's Councilmember Anika Bowie.
Anika Bowie.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
No worries. Well, I just wanted to comment on the community engagement process. For someone, I represent the Summit University, Rondo. From born and raised descendant of Rondo. So I do appreciate seeing the human side take into consideration. Now, my position on this is like ensuring that, MnDOT is going through an equitable process and engaging community and not only just centering voices of Rondo, particularly who I represent, in my community, but ensuring that it's not just a monolith, right? And not putting the responsibility on whether it's an individual organization or individual, or just like, I just kind of want to know, what is the breadth of the engagement, of the community input that MnDOT is how they're engaging, because I know there's a lot of organizations that are, not MnDOT, not staff, but are, advocating for how we are rethinking I-94. But especially, as like Councilmember Jalali shared, she's been at these PAC meetings for a while. In my capacity, for the past 10 years, I've been a community member. I've been a Rondo Fellow. I've been a activist. I've been, someone who have been pro reparative justice. Have talked about the gap the wealth gap that, you know, the I-94 had created. But now as a council member, right, I have to look at like what is my level of engagement, not only to my residents, right, who talk about this, but who've also been approached by many entities, right? Many of them are not able to distinguish who's MnDOT, who's other organizations. So can you share just what has been the scope, particularly with engaging with communities primarily in the Rondo neighborhood?
I will let maybe Renee talk about that. I do know it is very robust, and we have, as an agency, we have changed a lot over the years, and we do a lot of it. But there's always question whether it is enough or it's the right place. And as you mentioned, we would always welcome doing it alongside in partnership with PAC members who have constituency and be with us, and also the advocacy groups as well, work together. But anyway, we have our own process. I'll let Renee talk.
Yeah, thank you for the question, council member. Yeah, we do have our community leaders as well, and we do have representatives on the community leaders that are within the Rondo community, the Rondo Land Trust, and we Connect Rondo, among maybe others. And so we really rely on them to help us kind of identify places that we can be at in the community. Obviously, the Rondo Roundtable, but other just events that happen within that community that we plan to be at over the, you know, into the summer and into the fall. And so we definitely welcome recommendations, but, you know, it's a long corridor. There's lots of stakeholders. We do our best to get out there and really get into the community and share those. Hallie Q. Brown is also on there. I know they've had some leadership changes as well, but trying to get in there to meet with them so they can bring their kind of constituents and members that they serve and that visit that center into conversation. So we're welcome to continue planning that and really hearing from that community among all of the others along the corridor.
Thank you. And I also wanted to share, you know, I appreciate Chair Charles, Commissioner Zelli speaking about just how the public apology by former Mayor Chris Coleman and Commissioner Zelli kind of shaping how MnDOT approaches this in a different way, to where it's just not a project that is covering infrastructure. It is a community-driven, engaged project. It is also a project that is working in partnership with particularly the municipalities that represents the area where the damage has been done. And also I would find it beneficial if we, as the city, and particularly, you know, with my office, can get some of the historical analysis, and also if there is any like economic analysis around just, you know, not how the freeway has like just, I mean, of course, as an infrastructure impacted the neighborhood, but all the other areas, right, around culturally, economically, environmental wise, health wise. I know I've talked about that in the last meeting, but, you know, as we are working, especially at the council level, on creating a reparative analysis, that would be helpful. Also, and you know, as we are moving along with this, I heard, you know, Chair Zelli had mentioned that there's now another principle or another asset that's going to be part of this process. And I think I want to, you know, definitely uphold that, to where we have a process that community voices are heard, and we also have a process that beyond them being heard, there's actual action being taken place based off of their feedback.
Thank you, Council Member. Any other hands? I don't see any. With that, we can move on to the next part of the agenda, which is alternatives, overview, preliminary recommendations, and discussion.
Thanks, Connie. I appreciate it. It's been a while since this group has spoken about the different alternatives in detail, but you were sent a copy of pictures of the alternatives with some descriptions. They are also available on the project website. We also provided, as Commissioner Doggenberger had indicated earlier, copies of the evaluation criteria. So before we, jump into the actual evaluation, just wanted to do a quick reminder of what the alternatives are that we're looking at, as well as the criteria that will be used to evaluate them. So going back a little bit in time, the alternatives were developed after drafting the purpose and needs statement and the evaluation criteria. And that's very intentional, as you want to indicate what you're going to do so you don't bias a selection of an alternative. So in other words, you're not creating a criteria that favor something that you want to do. The alternatives were identified based on the transportation problems that were existing and that we were seeing that going to continue into the future. We went out and we shared the problems and we asked people what they were interested in seeing. And the public was very generous in telling us the things that they liked and that they didn't like about the current 94 corridor. We received numerous ideas and comments of things that we should be thinking about as we are looking to fix those problems. Some items were what I would call more elements. They are things that can be looked at under a variety of alternatives. They are not necessarily specific to a particular alternative. And we've kept that information and we will continue to use that information as we move forward into the Tier 1 EIS. So people have talked about land bridges, stitches, caps, and other elements that they'd like to see, along with pedestrian and bicycle elements that will be explored in more detail. So those things are not being ignored and they will be considered. MnDOT and Metropolitan Council worked together to do a transit study to look at what was possible in terms of transit in this corridor and to understand the transit needs of the corridor. And as a result of that effort, it was identified that bus transit would be the preferred mode because that was what was going to attract users in the area that we could be able to serve. We have a pedestrian and bicycle working group that have been meeting throughout the project process, and they have given us numerous ideas and inputs on opportunities to cross the corridor and to travel along the corridor. Again, those elements will be incorporated in more detail as the alternatives are further refined and the process is further advanced. And MnDOT is committed to incorporating those elements into this project. So with that, 10 alternatives were created. The first one is the no-build alternative, which is the alternative is leaving the highway as it is today. That is a requirement that we need to have as part of the NEPA process, and that will be continued to remain through all stages of the environmental process. It's the baseline from which all the other alternatives are evaluated. One thing I do want to say is that anything on this list that has A or B does not mean that anything is preferred. A is not preferred over B. It is just that there happened to be two different options, and we didn't know if there was going to be more or less coming forward on some of these. And so it was more of a way of documenting differences between the alternatives. All right, with that, as I indicated, the no build is carried throughout. We also have maintenance A and maintenance B. Maintenance A essentially is kind of doing the repairs that you absolutely need to do, but you don't really do anything beyond that. Maintenance B would provide for a bus shoulder along the corridor for the entire corridor. Presently, there are some gaps along the river crossing and areas approaching that. Following the 35W bridge collapse, that was opened up to general traffic, and part of the maintenance B alternative would be to put in a bus shoulder for that area. We also looked at two at-grade options. The at-grade option A would have bus travel, the BRT, in the center of the corridor, and it would have 2 lanes of traffic open for all use, so general purpose traffic in each direction. at grade B moves those lanes from the middle to the respective sides of the corridor. And so there are some different advantages with each of those two different alternatives, but they essentially both provide the two travel lanes in each direction and provide the bus rapid transit. The local regional was the next alternative, and this alternative is a combination of a freeway where you would have most of the traffic that is traveling through the corridor on that center part on the slide. Buses would be able to use the shoulder in here, and you'd have 2 lanes of freeway traffic on this. There would only be 3 or 4 access points to this alternative. The 3 access points would be looking at the entrance and exit points and 1 other location on the corridor. The 4 access points would have the entrance and the exit points and 2 in between, most likely at Snelling and at 280. And then the other component of this is that there would be a local roadway network adjacent to that that would serve access to the local trips along the corridor. So for the shorter trips, more local destinations would be using that roadway. We also looked at reducing the size of the freeway. So in this case, you would have 2 lanes in each direction that everybody could use, and then a managed lane in the middle. So you'd have 2 open for everybody and a managed lane, which would be those riding the bus, willing to carpool or to pay for access and use on the corridor. The reconfigured freeway, this alternative would make the freeway consistent. Today, most of the corridor is 4 lanes in each direction. However, as you approach Snelling, there is the lane drop right before the exit, and then it joins again after the exit. So there's some areas where it is not consistent. The reconfigured freeway would have consistency, and again, we would have managed lanes on this corridor as well. 1 lane in each direction for the managed lane, and then 3 lanes again for all traffic. Then we have expanded freeway A. In this case, this would be adding another lane to the corridor for the specific purpose of bus and, again, carpoolers and those willing to pay. Expanded freeway B is adding another lane, but it would be a general purpose lane that would be open for everybody to use. Any questions on the alternatives themselves? I'm not seeing any, Connie.
No, I don't.
Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and he's going to talk about the evaluation criteria. Thank you.
Oop, hand popped up.
We do have a question, Councilmember Wansley.
Apologies.
Thank you. If you can go back to the reconfiguration slide, I just wanted to make sure I heard correctly. The reconfiguration, is that different from the expansion, and if not, could you share in what way they are more so different? Because you mentioned kind of uniformity with like the 4 lanes, and that still seems like an expansion, but I just want to get clarity on that.
So most of the corridor today is 4 lanes already. It would be converting one of those 4 lanes to a managed lane. So you'd be taking it away from the general purpose use.
Okay. Thanks for that clarity.
Yep.
Okay. If no more hands, Mark, you can jump into the criteria.
Perfect. Thank you, Jack and Connie. So all 10 of these alternatives were evaluated against the same criteria. They were assigned different ratings based on an alternative's ability to address all of the identified criteria. PAC members have been provided with a matrix that lists the criteria, categories, subcategories, and measures used for the evaluation. There are 4 main categories of criteria with several subcategories under each. The 4 main categories include our purpose and need, the social, economic, and environmental, the C, resources, goals and livability, and then additional considerations. Purpose and need categories have been identified for mainline and access alternatives based on transportation needs in the corridor. Other than the no-build alternative, which serves as our base for comparing the other alternatives, an alternative cannot be carried forward for further study if it does not meet the purpose and need component. The C impact categories have been identified based on resources in the corridor and criteria that could have a discernible variation at our scoping level and tier 1 designs and could result in findings with major impacts. Goals and livability categories address the goals that we've heard from the public and the livability framework that were developed way back in phase 1 in a lot of our engagement work. Additional consideration categories include factors concerning cost, maintenance, and consistency with adopted plans. Measures at the scoping stage of the process where we are now, they're done at a higher level, seeing as we have not done as much detailed design work. And then in the tier 1, more detail will be provided. So we get into the more detailed work. And as we move it with those individual projects, then that move into the tier 2. Thank you, Jack. So the first set of criteria are associated with the alternative's ability to address our project in need. The 4 needs were identified for the project, and they include walkability and bikeability, safety, infrastructure condition, and mobility. The walkability and bikeability look at crossing distances, including those that provide a grade separation. We can go back one, Jack. I jumped the gun there. Thank you. Those that provide a grade separation, fewer conflict points, as well as travel times between origins and destinations. Safety looks at crashes on the transportation network and how well each of the alternatives address the number and severity of crashes. It also looks at the crashes by type of facility. So freeway, local street, so on and so forth. And the infrastructure condition looks at the alternatives, how it addresses our roadway and bridge condition. Now we can go on to the next one, Jack. And mobility looks at the ability of motorized vehicles to travel in a way to increase person throughput, provide for reliable travel times, and to provide access to adjacent land uses. And this includes transit vehicle, freight vehicles, EMS, and cars and trucks. Alternatives must address the transportation needs to be considered viable and to move forward for additional study into the Tier 1 EIS. In looking at our C resources, there are 11 of them that we used in evaluating these alternatives here in our scoping phase. The same categories will be used in the next phase, the Tier 1. However, the measures and the criteria will be more detailed. The next 3 slides we're going to talk about, we're just going to show you the 11 categories that are here. As you can see, we've got environmental justice, historic archaeological cemetery, and Section 4F recreational resources. Others are the Section 6F, specifically federally funded recreational resources, so similar to 4F, but different. Contaminated properties, right-of-way, noise, and then the last of the slides are, they include water pollution or stormwater, air quality, threatened and endangered species, and wetlands. So all of the alternatives are evaluated for potential impacts, both good and bad, that could happen to each of these resources within the I-94 corridor. Alternatives that had more potential for negative impacts were given lower ratings for the different criteria than those with more opportunities to provide a positive impact. We can go on to the next slide, Jack. The third category of criteria used was our goals and livability framework that was established back in the phase 1 engagement portion. These criteria focus on items that the community indicated were very important. We've got a couple of slides for that. So here we've got sense of place, equity, economic vitality, and then we move into public health, connectivity, and safety. And it should be noted that the measures in this category, like other categories, are at a higher level based on the amount of design work that we have done to date. Let's see here. We can go to the next slide, Jack. And then the final category of the evaluation criteria, right, is our additional considerations, which really takes into account cost, construction cost, maintenance cost, as well as consistency with state and regionally adopted plans. So that's a lot of information about our analysis. So if there are questions, Connie, have we seen anything pop up?
I have not.
And maybe this, oh, we do have a question. Let's take a couple questions and then we'll take a break for 5 minutes because we are at about the halfway point of the 3 hours. So why don't we go ahead and take a couple questions and then pause and then come back after 5 minutes. So Connie, do you want to call on the first one?
Yes, Councilmember Bowie.
Thank you, Connie. Yeah, I had a question just around the evaluation. It seems like it covered public health, which I know really stress the importance. But is there any coverings around remediating the soil, or is that built into the cost effectiveness, or is that built or construction costs, or would that be built into the public health?
For some of that stuff, that would all be a part of our construction costs, council member, depending, right, exactly what, right. So if we have contaminated soils, that's going to be part of our construction costs. And with the little amount of work that we've done to date with respect to that design work and doing our normal process of drilling to see what the soils have, we would just have that in kind of as a contingency into the cost. Address it more and more detail the further we get along in some of the design work.
Got it. In my, I'm just using my time while I have it. For the other evaluation, is there anything around digital connectivity? Just knowing particularly in that Rondo area, it's just really, really poor connectivity, particularly around digital. When it comes to internet, fiber, all those things, is that being considered with these projects?
Good question. We haven't really started to look at that at this phase. It's certainly something that we will want to address when we get there, probably even after the tier 1. We may look at some of that stuff at a higher level within our tier 1 phase. So starting a year from now, roughly, and through those next 3 or so years, we'll start to take a look at some of that stuff, but that really won't be folded in until we get into some of the final design, the tier 2 stuff. But we certainly want to be made aware of it. We certainly want to have it on our radar screen so that we can have those kind of communications. And, we do want to look at those things. We do want to provide the things that are needed out there into the community. So we certainly want to be aware of those things. And yes, we would certainly have it be a part of our projects. We just haven't gotten to that stage yet.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Representative Jones.
Hi, thanks. And I'm just going to take the newbie prerogative to ask a lot of questions. particularly with regard to the biking and walking considerations. You had mentioned connectivity, but another thing that I'm curious if there are metrics around is more about like actual like comfort, because there are there are sidewalks that connect across 94 right now, but very few people are going to say that they feel comfortable walking along those. And so I'm wondering, that'll be my first question. I've got another one after this.
Great question also. That is certainly something that we do want to take a look at, and we want to get to that part of it to be able to be looking at those things, as opposed to just having a lane of traffic and a curb and then a 6-foot walking path or sidewalk. We're anxious to get to that next phase where we can start to look at that and what can we do that would be different, that isn't going to be just bikes and peds within 6 feet and being right next to vehicles traveling. What kind of creative designs can we have? What can we do to really enhance those opportunities and improve that comfort level? So yes, we are going to get there. It isn't at the stage we're at. Again, we haven't got to that level of detail, but we're anxious to get there, and we certainly want to look at that stuff. And we're excited for some of the opportunities that we can get to.
Awesome. And I'll just throw out there too, other components of like human physical well-being with regards to sound, and just lots of moving vehicles creates lots of sound, and even that can be less comfortable for people using active transportation. So I'd love to see things like that be incorporated into this decision-making process. The other pieces around air quality, in particular. So I'm an engineer by training, and I know it really matters where you draw your system's boundaries. And so if you are only looking at, whether or not there's emissions from vehicles within the system boundary, but it's not taking into account the growth of or reduction in those number of vehicles from a systemic level, it's not really painting the whole picture of how human health is being impacted. And so I'd love to hear more about how that's being evaluated and where that system boundary is being drawn.
Okay, so with respect to the air quality part of it all, that is not my strength part. I don't believe we have our air quality person on. I'm gonna look real quick. No. So I hate to get into the specific details of some of the air quality stuff, but it is, it is an active part of our analysis, and we have our air quality expert guiding us down the path that we need to be going down and doing the work that we need to do. And everything that we can do. We continue to work with the Federal Highway Administration and their experts on that. But I don't know, Melissa, do you want to add?
Yeah, we do look at air quality regionally, and we also have a really great presentation we gave at a previous PAC meeting going over air quality and how it's measured and how we're looking at it. So I will get that to you, Representative Jones. It's one of the things we've covered at a past PAC meeting.
Thank you.
And thank you for those questions, Representative Jones. We're really glad you could join us today. No worries about being new to this. We're glad you are participating, and I look forward to discussing this further. As Melissa noted, we did talk about that at one of the last PAC meetings, but would love the opportunity to sit down with you and talk about that further. And glad you brought up the questions too about the comfort for bikes and peds, because certainly we want facilities that bicyclists and pedestrians are considering usable, right? And the different alternatives provide different options for doing that. So thank you. And I see we have Council Member Wansley.
We do. And I just wanted to, I saw Commissioner Connolly's hand up. I just want to make sure her hand went down. She did it, or is it something that, if not, I'll just move over to.
No, I was gonna, I'll wait till after the break. I do have a question and a comment, but I'll wait.
Okay. Okay, Councilmember Wonsley.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, Representative Jones, I know this was also something in pertaining to air quality that I also raised at the last meeting, and actually Melissa had a meeting with my office to follow up on that and send some materials my way that I can forward to you. But what I will name too, I would say the case was not made in terms of baseline understanding of, especially when we talk about the dismissal of the ACT rate option around what are we evaluating? Like, is it actually apples to apples? Because tons of data shows that air quality around highways actually are worse than when we're looking at air quality conditions in pedestrian corridors, and the fact that there really isn't analysis being done at the MnDOT level around that comparative level was very concerning. And even the reports that were sent to me were out of date. So I'll forward that to you. It's good to know we have an engineer amongst the PAC team to have that additional expertise to be able to lean into. So I'll forward those materials. But absolutely, that has been something of concern, especially knowing just the public health impacts of air quality conditions amongst highways and how that leads to all associated again with higher concentration of vehicle traffic that happens along corridors like highways. So I will forward that information to you ASAP as well.
Okay, no more hands, Commissioner.
Thank you. And certainly we will take more questions and comments after the break, but we'll go ahead and go to that 5-minute break. Thanks, everyone. Please come back at 11:07.
But we want to make sure we're keeping the time. So, Jason, are you ready to take the next few slides?
Sure. So we know there's been some interest in the traffic modeling for the project, so we want to take a few slides here just to discuss the model that we're using, how we've been using it, what it can do, what some of the limitations are. It is
Hold on. There's a question by Commissioner Conley.
Yes, that's correct. We were going to go back to Commissioner Conley to see if she still had the question after the break.
Yes,
Sorry about that,
sorry,
Commissioner.
Jason.
I do. Thank you, Jason. I won't be long. I want to use my capacity in the previous slides that we were going over in regard to the scoping and the purpose and need and the criteria and evaluation that were used. I would like to use within my capacity as an advisory member of this group that the identification of past harms that Chair Zelli mentioned at the beginning of our meeting, I did not see in any of the ways in which this the alternatives were evaluated where past harms were included in that, even in some of the additional considerations. So I'm advising that leadership of this PAC take into consideration and fully vet past harms that were done throughout the Federal Highway Act of 1956 and how that has impacts in our region today, specifically the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. We've heard a lot about how Reconnect Rondo has been an incredible way to repair past harms done. And so I would like to see, and I don't know what that does to your timeline. I don't know what that does to how we expand where we're at right now. We're incorporating an evaluation of past harm. That needs to be done. I would like to advise our leadership, the commissioner and Chair Zelli, to incorporate that ahead of the 2 years that I heard this would start.
Thank you, Commissioner Conley. I would note that online, we do have a lot of documentation about the history of the area. If you're interested in history, we'll get a link in the chat so everyone can access that. I would also say one of the parts of this project, and you're right, it's not part of the evaluation, but it's called cumulative impacts. And we will be looking back to when the freeway was installed and the harms that were caused when the freeway was installed. That's part of gathering that history, those documents kind of showing what things look like. We have to have an alternative to complete that analysis though. So it's cumulative. It considers both the history and the alternative that we'll be looking at and proposing going forward.
So if I may, the concern I have with that is that happens after an alternative has already been chosen. I'm saying that we move that past harm analysis up further. So I know the history. I understand that part of it and the history of the communities surrounding the neighborhood and the many neighborhoods and the history of the freeway. I'm saying that analysis of past harm should happen a lot earlier than when a final alternative is proposed. And so I'm advising that start much earlier in the process, in fact, now.
Thank you for that comment. Yes, and we have started that, just to be clear, and maybe that's something we can bring back to folks as well. But I think I'm hearing that you want to see more about it. So we will look into what we can bring for information in the future.
And how it's being incorporated into the project design. So the initial slide showed like a bunch of different boxes with various different activities based on the years that this project will take. I want to specifically see that there is current evaluation of past harm being incorporated into the selection of the alternative and into each step as to how this project moves forward. So not just necessarily information, but I'm asking that an evaluation of past harm to communities in and around the project area is being incorporated into this process now and moving forward. And that means that you might have to potentially change dates, move around timelines. I don't know how that's going to work, but I'd rather see it as a functional piece of modeling, alternative, selection, all of that beginning now.
Thank you. Yep, that's something we can, sorry, Commissioner. That's something we can look at bringing back, but if you have something to add to.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Commissioner Conley, for flagging that for us. And I think what I'm hearing is not only be considering that as we're reviewing and analyzing alternatives, but being sure that we're incorporating that as we're describing each alternative and what it would be bringing to the community and how it addresses past harms or impacts past harms. So thank you for that.
Representative Jones, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. I as we're moving into this traffic modeling process piece, I'm wondering, and again, apologies, I'm new to this, so I'm going to be asking a lot of newbie questions. When you get into this, can you start with what traffic modeling is required by NEPA or not, and maybe it's not NEPA, just some of those higher level, like what modeling is required? Thank you.
Representative. And maybe we should see if there are any other questions before we get into the traffic analysis, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit too. The question that Representative Jones just brought up about what's required and why we did what we did at this point. But any other questions before we get into that?
Yeah, I don't see any hands.
Great. Melissa, do you have some thoughts on Representative Jones' questions before we turn it over to Jason?
That is what Jason's going to go to. So it was a great segue, and we'll let Jason talk a little bit more about the modeling we've done, what's required through NEPA, and yeah, let's turn it over to Jason.
Yep. So the main requirement, I think, with NEPA as it relates to traffic modeling is just, we've selected what our evaluation criteria are. So then it just becomes what is the best tool for the job of measuring those criteria and evaluating alternatives given the stage of the project that we're at, which is the scoping stage. We don't have very refined design details done yet, so that can influence the kind of limit the ability to use a more detailed modeling process. So we're working with a planning level model here. It is the Metropolitan Council's regional travel demand model. Using that at this stage of this type of project is consistent with established practices in the region, also consistent with federal highway practice. It is an activity-based model. That basically means that it simulates transportation decisions that are being made by individuals. The individuals in the model are choosing things like whether to travel at all, and then if so, what time are they leaving, where are they going, what route are they taking, what mode are they using, are they chaining a bunch of trips together, or in what order are they making those trips? One of the main factors that's built on is land uses as determined by cities as part of their adopted comprehensive plans. Those include population and employment forecasts associated with those planned land uses. Through this process, we have been coordinating with a traffic working group that has been meeting throughout. Consists of staff, representatives from the Metropolitan Council, cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, Hennepin County, Ramsey County, MnDOT, also Federal Highway Administration. They have been reviewing the modeling as it's been getting done, reviewing the approach, weighing in on that. Also did meet with national experts from Federal Highways Resource Center for some outside guidance for them to weigh in on the methodology that we've been using. You go to the next. Just a little bit more on what the model is. It includes vehicle travel, transit, also non-motorized walking, biking. When those individuals are making their travel decisions in the model, they're sensitive to relative changes in travel time. So, for example, if all else is equal, if travel by one mode gets faster because the route improves or something, then travelers are going to be a little bit more likely to use that mode or that route that improves. Can also distinguish between purposes of trips. It can tell a work trip from a shopping trip, things like that. Does give a good high-level overview of travel patterns with various scenarios that we've been looking at with it. It does have some limitations, though. It's not necessarily a suitable thing to look at really major shifts in mode. It doesn't directly quantify like long-term land use changes in response to transportation network changes. It's still taking those comprehensive plan land uses as an input. And as far as traffic goes, it can tell us if there is more demand on a road than what that road can accommodate based on what the capacity of it is, but it does not look at traffic operations in any more detail than that. So it can't account for things like lane changing or a bottleneck in a downstream segment affecting things upstream. That's one of the things that as we get into future phases of the project, we develop some more design details. We can make a more detailed traffic simulation, and then at that point we'll have a better sense of those more detailed operational impacts. But given those limitations, we did do some sensitivity analysis on the model results that we were getting, especially with some of the alternatives that reduce capacity on I-94, seeing that those would be likely to divert a pretty high volume of traffic onto some adjacent routes to levels that would really create some congestion issues on those routes. And so we wanted to see want to know how robust that conclusion is. Basically, would that conclusion change if the model happens to be overstating that amount of diverted traffic? And so sensitivity analysis reduced that diversion by a third, and then assumed that that third share of traffic would go somewhere else, would choose some other destination or do something other than travel in the corridor. And then looking at the remaining traffic on the alternate routes in the corridor, still finding that that is a pretty high volume, more than the adjacent routes. Think University Avenue, Lake Street, Marshall Avenue, more than they have the capacity to accommodate. We also had MnDOT hired an additional third-party consultant to do a review of the modeling, just to take another look at what's been done so far and to do some additional analysis on what would happen with the existing traffic with the alternatives. That was presented at a previous meeting of this group. And generally, it validated the data and the findings, came to a similar conclusion that there's pretty strong demand, both regionally and from the immediate surrounding area to travel in this corridor. Yeah, like I said, currently in the scoping stage of the project, using a planning level model. There will be additional modeling future phases of the project as we get into the Tier 1 EIS. We'll be looking at a micro simulation of traffic that can look at, like at the vehicle level, how the roadways and how the intersections are operating. And even following that, as specific projects get into design, more project-specific modeling will happen at that point to refine the details of what exactly gets designed in terms of things like how long turn lanes are and what the intersection traffic control is. One other thing we know that there's been some interest in is the idea of dynamic traffic assignment. Basically what that means is drivers in the model drivers in the model that we've been using are making their route choices before they leave, when they start their trip. In a dynamic traffic assignment model, they can change their decisions and route. Imagine if they've got Google Maps open or something as they're driving, or they just drive up and they see that there's a queue. They take some other route to get around that. That was considered. It has not been used to this point, to this project. There's a few reasons for that. The main one, I think, is just trying to right size the tool that we're using, given the stage of the project that we're at and the details that we know. Another big reason is that we are being consistent with using the regional model for this kind of project. It has been developed, it's been in use for a long time. It has been validated based on regional traffic, versus if we were to develop a dynamic traffic assignment model just for this project, we'd be starting from the ground up and having to really do a lot of work to validate that, to likely get a pretty similar answer given the capacity of the network of alternative routes that we're looking at, given the amount of traffic that some of these alternatives would divert from the corridor. And so just to summarize, we are using the best available traffic data and traffic modeling approach for this project. Given where we're at and given the nature of the project, we are being consistent with regional and federal traffic analysis practices, and trying to be transparent about that and just trying to be as accurate as we can, given that we're looking at 20 years into the future and we're looking at potentially large changes to the network with some of these alternatives.
Are you done, Jason?
Yes, if there are any questions.
Okay. Yes, Councilmember Wansley.
I'm just still once again confused around, especially this slide here, around why we did not extend dynamic modeling for the other options like ag grade, which from my understanding, I know I had this conversation even in my private briefing around it's the most modern, form of evaluation, especially for projects like this, especially in the number of reports that I've read in outside of MnDOT, because I've had to rely on that in gathering additional understanding of how we could pursue an ag grade or a boulevard proposal, since MnDOT has continuously refused to pursue this as a form of serious consideration. So I just want to know why we could not apply that seriously to the current alternatives that, again, PAC members have asked you to pursue, community members are asking you to pursue, as opposed to waiting until we dismiss them and then take up now these more serious evaluation modeling sources. So yeah, what went into that rationale?
So I mentioned a few of the limitations of what the current model has, and if we were to go to a dynamic traffic assignment, that would partially address one of them, but we would still have the longer term land use interaction that wouldn't cover, and we would also we have from the level of traffic and looking at the capacity of the roadways, looking at the volumes, the conclusion would be unlikely to be very different.
I don't understand. The reason why I feel a little concerning about that, because, and I know you all are coming to CNI to give a presentation, mid-February, but we did receive a report that was based off of dynamic modeling that did take into account those very things, especially around the land use piece, because that's actually one of the biggest components around the ag grade proposal is, and actually getting at what Commissioner Conley raised around how do we do this reparative work that the current highway I-94 disrupted, in terms of how do we restore land back to communities that can allow for more opportunities for home ownership, restores a tax base that allows for more green space, those things. That actually was factored into that dynamic modeling analysis in that report. So I don't understand if that independent consultant, who I think is actually nationally reverend, was able to do it for that report, why we couldn't do that here.
I jump on two here, Jason. We will show some maps that talk about particularly the ag grade and the modeling that was done. As Jason said, dynamic traffic modeling acts like Google Maps. Oh, there's a queue, I'm going to reroute you. There, I'll show you in the maps, particularly at the pinch points on the river. There's no place left to route to. We're so over capacity as we look at our model, as we look at our network, and only a limited number of bridges. There's no dynamic place left to route. They are all over capacity by extreme amounts. So that dynamic traffic model would not give us a different answer in this case.
So once again, I'm just still a little confused of, and I don't know if you all have been in conversation, and maybe that might be another opportunity if we had that space as PAC members to actually have independence and talk amongst ourselves. I wish we could have that same consultant to be able to talk about how they were able to land somewhere differently. I think the same situation happened, was it in Rochester, am I believing correctly, where they did something similar, where their Department of Transportation also anticipated around their traffic, I think the same modeling that you're using right now, a bottleneck, and that actually did not come into fruition. So again, I'm just trying to figure out how we're, again, like you all are thinking ahead, you're trying to use, get secondary, third, opinions from other subject matter experts to get to, basically where you all are going to recommend to us of like a no bill, keeping status quo. I think I'm trying to also figure out how there's some other subject matter experts out there who have been able to say, no, you can, through other modeling techniques, also be able to advance more serious consideration of the ag grade option. So and it feels, of course, it's missing from this presentation. So I just wanted to note that and be in conversation with PAC members around how we can continue getting more analysis done that is not present in this current presentation in front of us today.
Yeah, and we have also been in contact with folks around the country, folks who've done dynamic traffic modeling, folks who haven't done dynamic traffic modeling, and it is very context specific. Again, we have a river between our two downtowns that creates a network that is not consistent, that is not as connected as some other networks are, that has more ability to transfer trips to different roadways. We have a limited number of bridges across a river, and they can only hold so many people.
Councilmember Wansley, maybe just one other thing on that. And, as we talk about where those trips would go, that is, and I'm thinking again back to Commissioner Conley's comment, when we think about the impacts and the past harms, so diverting traffic onto other local roads would further negatively impact already impacted communities. And that gets to those past harms and environmental justice concerns that we consider as we are evaluating these alternatives. And I think
I know we'll get there. I'm sorry, I didn't get, but again, not all that information is present here too. And I raised this in my private briefing. We asked if analysis was done around, are you incorporating actually the vehicle miles travel in terms of the state goals around the 100% legislation in terms of your factor reduction? And it seems like in the report back that we got, you were assuming a modest increase in even public transportation. So again, still holding for a status quo expectation that, we're not even going to really expect folks to shift onto other modal usage to even accommodate for something like an at-grade level. So not even, once again, like routing out other means to actually take serious of an at-grade level. There was also dismissal of like how cities are approaching encouraging multimodal use. Many of us are investing in traffic calming programs. We are creating a street, redesign plans and programs to, again, encourage our residents to shift away from car-centered use so that we can do things like this, to support projects like this. And none of those things were considered. So once again, I don't think there has been full vetting, and that's why you have PAC members here who are asking you to not just write off this proposal and then tell us to stick with the status quo when our constituents are asking, no, I don't think you did your full due diligence here. And I think many of us in our cities are trying to figure out how we can do this, how we can support you, how we can leverage our resources and programs in place right now that is trying to figure out how do we move away from a car-centered future in cities to be able to support something like this that can uplift restoration, that will build a more climate resilient future, that will actually support more genuine anti-racist goals, that will actually address economic vitality in a more meaningful way. All the things that in your evaluation criteria that is not addressed in this presentation. But I know you have to give lip service more so in this presentation to the no build option. But again, I know it's not going to get fully addressed in this meeting. But once again, I think a number of us will have more thorough conversation around why we feel very disheartened that we don't think the at-grade option was really given a chance from the beginning, and why some of the information that's being presented here is a little bit troubling and doesn't really feel like it warrants a dismissal at this time.
Thank you,
Commissioner Conley.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm trying to turn my video on. There we are. I wanted to be very clear for the record, Commissioner, that I don't think it's fair that we utilize past harm to talk about what a dynamic modeling would do in terms of moving traffic through neighborhoods. I'm talking about past harm should have been incorporated into this entire process, given the history of the Federal Highway Act of 1956. So the freeway has sustained itself since 1956 on the backs of communities of color. So if you live in Cedar Riverside, you're likely to jump on 94 to maybe go to work, come home, take a quick trip. You're not coming from a suburb going through the city to get to another suburb, which is what some modeling has shown. When I had my briefing with leadership, with members of the PAC and the lead engineers, we talked about this very same thing. Where is this notion that all of this traffic is going to go to the surrounding communities? There is no street I can take in Cedar Riverside that's going to get me downtown St. Paul. There is no frontage road there. And then the conversation evolved into trucks and moving goods through the city into another part of the region. That's exactly why these highways were placed in cities in the first place, to move people through. And they were placed strategically along the same lines that were used for redlining. So past harm isn't just, we need to think about that as traffic gets off of this stretch and it turns into a boulevard. We're talking about past harm being incorporated into every single piece of this, the modeling, the alternatives, not just at the end. So I want to be very clear about what I mean by the evaluation of past harm, knowing where we started in 1956, where we could be in however many years, but being mindful throughout each step of this process that there are harms here, that the people who actually live in these communities, I don't know how many PAC members do, or leadership that lives within or along this route, needs to take into consideration what has happened, what is currently happening, and what you're proposing is ultimately a continuation of what we've heard was a mistake, of what we've been apologized to for. So that can't go without a major underline there. That I don't want to hear us talk about past harm as we talk about traffic moving out into the residents' neighborhoods. It has to have been from the start. It has to start now. It's my advice. It has to start now, and it has to be a continuation throughout the life of this project. We are rethinking this, and we're rethinking it from a way that it was thought of in 1956 as a way to separate white communities from Black and brown communities. That's what they were thinking then. So if we are rethinking this now, it needs to be the opposite of what placed those freeways there in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Conley.
Thank you. We have Senator Claire Olmo-Verbetten.
It's just getting my camera on. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So I've just kind of been sitting back and listening, and I feel like folks have made really great points. So I want to try to add a different component here. But coming from the same place of hearing a lot about this from my constituents, and I have the utmost respect for, subject matter experts and our staff who put a lot of work into this process. I also see often our communities not being recognized, being dismissed as subject matter experts, kind of to the point that Commissioner Conley was bringing up, like past harm has to be acknowledged throughout all of this. And they're experts in their lived experience. There's people who lived through this first construction. And there's so much passion around just having the opportunity to continue the process to fully vet the at-grade option that I'm struggling with why that sort of subject matter expertise is not being valued in the same way that other subject matter expertise is being valued, when we have said we want to lift up looking at past harm, understanding the history here, having a racial equity analysis. It also feels really, I'm just feeling very uncomfortable by seeing this kind of dynamic between our elected officials who represent these communities. We're a pretty diverse group here. We represent really diverse communities. We're finally at the table here to advocate for our communities. And it just feels like that, again, that subject matter expertise is being dismissed. It's just, I'm feeling very, very uncomfortable with that and just want to name that. And I feel like I mean, just even hearing, Council Member Wansley have to say, like, I've been looking at all these other studies and having to research into what's been happening in Rochester, like, trying and trying to just be heard when we said that that's something we value. So it's like what you've told us as a value is not actually being valued in action. We should really, if our community cares about this so much and just wants the opportunity to move through the process, just to fully vet it, why can't we do that? Especially given the history here of being, I mean, completely ignored. I'm really disappointed in that. So I just wanted to share that with folks.
If I may, Melissa, could you jump in and talk about a little bit about how past harms is part of this process? I don't think it's being ignored.
Well, but it is, I'm sorry. My point is if the community is saying they really want that, just two of those options to continue to move through.
I'm hoping we can get to my presentation eventually. As I move through things, we really talk through the why and the how and really more comprehensively. So I'm going to, yes, I hear you. And I'm hoping that you'll stay on just for the next bit while I do my presentation after we take these next questions.
Okay, Representative Sensimura. You're muted.
Thank you. And I do want to get to the presentation. I know that part of what the dynamic is right now is that some of us have already gotten the presentation and gotten the preview, that the grade options are not going to move forward, and that we have heard loud and clear from our communities that they are very upset and don't feel heard with that. So I think it's important for us to all get into information, but also like we know that that's what's coming. And so I think that's what we're reacting to. I will say that I really feel, and I know that I think the majority of PAC members who are here today feel that there should be some formal way for us to register after we get this presentation that we are not okay with not moving forward with the grade option. I feel like that is the only thing that I can do to fully represent what I am hearing from constituents and what they want me to do as a member of this PAC. I think we've given multiple, like, this is how we want to be involved. This is how we want to show up. We want to make sure that there's public comment periods. We want to make sure that there's a formal voting mechanism that can be registered. We want to make sure that we can really feel like we have dug into the analysis. I hope that at the end of this meeting, we can like talk about how that can actually be put into place. I will say that like for myself, if we get to the end of, this process and we are not able to have any formal mechanisms in place, then I really have to question whether or not I can stay as a member of this PAC, because I don't really feel like I'm able to represent my constituents if there's no formal mechanism for my advice to be heard. And so, if there's not going to be some kind of formal voting or formal actions that we can take, then I just want to make it clear that I'm like questioning whether I can stay as a member of this PAC, and I will be reaching out to other PAC members to see if they feel the same way.
Yeah.
Honey, can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
Duly, yes, hear you, Representative Sensimura, but also every time you comment in this meeting, we are taking notes, we are writing this down. That becomes part of the record, part of the process, part of our NEPA record. We have an administrative record. All of your comments are noted, heard, and recorded.
Senator Fateh.
No, thank you so much. And I second the frustration and comments from my sister, Representative Sensimura. I too am very frustrated and share her concerns, and want to also reassess with her myself our membership within this PAC. I know that there has been multiple members that have called for the at-grade options to be studied, and I haven't heard from any, at least in my experience, that spoke out against that. So there seems to be a disconnect or neglect between what the body has been recommending and the actions that MnDOT is taking. So I just want to ask, has there been any advice, comments, input from any of the notes that has been taken, any of the meetings that have been documented that has actually been valued and accepted by the PAC members? And why is it that MnDOT is also just so unwilling or unable to allow a vote on this issue?
Thank you, Senator Fate. Yes, we have, during the process, we have done, redone the purpose and need, re-added to the evaluation criteria. We've looked at additional transit options at the request of the PAC. So we continue to take input from the PAC. We've also brought multiple presentations to the PAC from outside sources. So yes, we are hearing you. We are responding to your comments and taking your input.
Councilmember Osman.
Hello, everyone. I have been listening. I really appreciate some of the elected officials who have spoken out. I am someone who represent a district with that probably will be affected the most. 3 neighborhood, highest dense in the state, Ventura Village, Seward neighborhood, and Cedar Riverside. I'm looking at here this the air pollution and cancer risk data within Minneapolis. As you see, at darker it gets, that's right there what I represent. I think those people have a voice and they need to be considered. We talked about the harm, past harm acknowledgement, but also there's a present harm that's happening right now. The lowest air quality residents, the most vulnerable, live in this neighborhood. And MnDOT should consider having an alternative, not running the freeway here, but really consider, especially when it comes to the cancer risk that I have shown, and also the air pollution, especially the minority, people of color, poor people neighborhood. No other where in the state is it this dark. So that is something that I would say as a PAC member that I want to speak out and say that MnDOT need to consider the data that is available, that people that are being harmed right now as we speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Jalali.
I want to just appreciate my senator for speaking up from a St. Paul perspective and as one of our representatives on racial equity in the state. And I just want to make the comment that for so many comments we've made on this discussion, the response from MnDOT is, we will note that, duly noted, we are taking notes. Like, we're asking you to be different. We are asking you to not just write down everything we said and put it in your administrative record. We want you to come back to us. We want a decision-making process for this PAC. We want the alternatives to reflect what our communities are asking for. Come back with action. That is my ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bowie.
Thank you, Connie. I just wanted to just share a perspective too, particularly as a council member, you know, in my first year being into office. I think many of the things that we are demanding and requesting, you know, through this process, how we govern, how we get to a consensus process. I think also it would be helpful if, you know, we display how that should be modeled. And I just want to just, you know, real quickly just share, like, coming into this seat, I, you know, come from a community that feel the same exact pain, felt that in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, the early 2000s, and here we are now. And one of the lessons that was learned through the process is that we cannot wait, right? We cannot wait from these government agencies to model what we want. Sometimes as leadership, we'll have to model that. And one of the things that I want to just at least offer to be helpful with making sure we have action is displaying, right, how we've had actions that were reparative in nature. And my first year coming to office was able to take the baton from former council member Russell Ballinger and permanently changing the street name. I had shared on record that that's not enough, right? We changed the name of Rondo back to Rondo and was able to honor many of the community members who once remembered their neighborhoods, lived in their houses, went to their place of business before this highway, and who are still here, right? Part of the process. They're part of many of the community engagement. They're actually part of the research and providing expertise through this process. Another way of showing and modeling that type of action is council was able to vote and pass for a budget to actually fund our reparative justice commission that's working on reparations, displaying a harm study to ensure that when we are having this analysis, that community members are represented in that process. And I think the advocacy that takes place needs to be here, and it doesn't, like, as it's starting, it definitely needs to continue throughout this process. But I think it's really important that we center the voices to who have actually experienced the harm in these multiple communities. I'm definitely not saying that the community in Rondo is the only community, but it is a bulk of that history, and it's not just history; it's still current today. And also, I just want to share too. Been at the Reconnecting Communities Summit. Those are federal investments, particularly ensuring that we have equity at the center of what we do, and also distinguish whose voices are we representing. And I know many of my colleagues across the river in Minneapolis represents many voices, and my duty here particularly is to represent the voices of Ward 1, and that is a diverse group of people that care about climate action, that care about public health, that care about housing, that cares about reparations, putting that in the center of how we go about it. So I just wanted to offer, I think, let's model it, right? And we as elected officials have our own platform of, yes, we could give our demands, which I'm here in solidarity with you, ensuring that we have discretion, but also stick around through the process. So that's all I want to share.
Thank you. We got two more hands. Deputy Mayor, three now. Deputy Mayor Stark.
I'm not a deputy mayor, but I am here representing the mayor.
I thought you were.
No, Chief Resilience Officer is my title. I just wanted to reiterate Mayor's position from the last meeting that he does support an at-grade option moving forward for all the reasons that he stated. It's consistent with the position that the St. Paul Climate Justice Advisory Board has taken and that we've shared with MnDOT as well. And just to note specifically about the advisory board, it's a diverse group of residents who have engaged in this topic over an extended period of time, heard from kind of all lots of significant stakeholders and parties. And they've said that they don't specifically endorse the boulevard, but they think that there's a lot of interest and enough questions that need to be answered in the rest of the process that option should move forward. I think it's also really important to note that this process continuing is a really important part of the process. I'm worried, based on what other PAC members are saying, that this process could disintegrate in some way. And specifically when we've got folks like Reconnect Rondo and so many community members kind of putting in a lot of time to try to figure out how to rebuild around this corridor. I just want to express concern that if somehow the process fails to move forward, a lot of those hopes and dreams will also be stalled. And so trying to figure out how we work together to both keep moving forward and keep the options on the table that people really want to hear more about. And I understand the technical reasons why MnDOT believes it shouldn't move forward. Those have been explained, but this is more than a technical process, which I think is clear from this conversation. Thank you.
Okay, 3 more hands if we can. We would like to get to Melissa's presentation as well. We have time right after Melissa's presentation on the agenda for the PAC to have further discussion. I'm looking forward to that. Senator Fateh.
Thank you so much, Connie. I also appreciate Russ's comments. I think that it's important to know nobody's advocating for like a singular option to go all in on. We're just asking for fairness, for voices to be heard, and for there to be a continuation to study the at-grade option. I wanted to ask, who's like the ultimate decision maker around whether or not the PAC members get a vote?
Thank you, Senator. You know what? With hearing, Connie, if I may,
go ahead. No,
after hearing all the input on that, we will take that back and talk about the format of the PAC moving forward and what we would likely do differently. So why don't we take that under advisement and give that some thought?
I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I understood. So are we revisiting the ability of the PAC to take a formal vote?
That is correct. We're going to, not today, but from what we heard today, we're going to give some further consideration to the format of the PAC. MnDOT
Awesome.
will do that and come back. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. And in those considerations, I'd appreciate if members can get maybe some information about what the potential reservations for that would be. But thank you so much for that.
Certainly. Thank you, Senator.
Yes. Part of it, Senator, might be how we would fit it into, like it was mentioned, the technical process, a federal process, which it is, federal state process, and how that decision would influence that. How will that work? And so that's, as the commissioner said, we will take that and discuss and get back to you. Councilman Wansley, and then we'll go to Melissa.
Yeah, thank you. Just super quick. Thank you so much, Senator Fateh, for raising that. I did just want to make sure we honored Representative Spencer Mura's, original request that we do have a formal confirmation from MnDOT that we formalize a follow-up on our request to have a formal advisory procedural process for how we, actually operate in this process as advisory members and as elected leaders. And we all know as elected leaders who sit on advisory bodies, that is very possible. So to come into the space and tell that is not, that's like, no one's believing that. So yes, we would love to be able to come back at our next meeting or even over email and really hear some very thoughtful next steps on how, as a PAC board, we can really have a formal input on how we advise you all independently around how we're advancing our constituents' interests, especially around the at-grade/boulevard option. And then another just quick thing, I do want to say, Councilmember Bowie, I want to acknowledge the frustration that at least some of the folks from Minneapolis side, it's not, and especially when we're talking about the last resort of maybe leaving this space, is not because we haven't exhorted any action in our communities. As I mentioned in somewhat the chat, many of us have invested funding opportunities to try to study this option and actually have done so in pursuit of collaboration with MnDOT, with our own respective departments of transportation, and have been rejected time and time again, and trying to study, again, in a collaborative way, this option. And that says something in itself. We've had community members, community organizations with their own small budgets do this work themselves. We've had, again, community members, East Africans, indigenous folks who all are also currently being impacted by concentrated pollution, go out and organize and close, pollutants in their community. Like, we're having all of that organizing happen. And people are using that organizing to tell us to go into spaces like this and say, we need something completely different in this corridor. And then we come back and tell them, well, actually, the recommendation is we're going to keep the status quo. And so that is the frustration that we're saying. Like, our communities are organizing, and that is why we're coming in month after month after month. And where to the point is like, what is the other resort? So I do want to uplift, similar to your phenomenal constituents who also have had to bear the brunt of decades of disinvestment motivated by racism that is embedded within institutions. MnDOT is not exempt. Our communities of color too are disproportionately impacted right now and are currently asking to be heard. And we are just trying to do our due diligence also as elected leaders like yourself to as the paid staff members of MnDOT also continue to take our community serious as well.
Thank you. Thank you, council member. I think we should, the commissioner, with your permission, I think we should go to Melissa to talk about, have her presentation. We're running a little bit behind, I see, and so
I appreciate all that input. Let's go to Melissa now, because I know there's going to be a little more time, and then more interest too at that point in hearing from our PAC members. So let's go to Melissa's presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Connie. I do want to note I'm going to skip past some slides. We are pretty behind. I have 30 pretty packed slides, so you will see me skip past some things. I will send something out afterwards summarizing those pieces. So apologies that we have to skip some of it, but I do want to leave time for discussion and public comment. So so we have created a summary matrix that highlights the evaluation criteria for scoping. For each alternative, we show a rating. So a green, yellow, or red for simplicity of understanding. At the end of the row for each alternative, we then have a recommendation of how MnDOT and FHWA intend to move forward with that alternative. So it says either dismiss or retain. Please note, as you're looking at the matrix, which was sent out in an email last night and is also available online, there will be a message in the chat to access that. That the yellow, green, and red descriptions vary slightly between the criteria groups. So look at the bottom for the key. The project team has re-reviewed all the data and ratings and believe the alternatives identified for retain have the greatest ability to address the transportation needs, minimize impacts to adjacent communities, and help support the goals that were identified by the communities. Alternatives that move into the tier 1 will be further studied and refined. It's anticipated there will be several refinements, that elements identified by the public will be considered, and some more will be integrated. Some may not be compatible with all alternatives. Mitigation for impacts, that cumulative impacts we talked about, will also be identified in the tier 1, which incorporates community feedback and input. So this is an opportunity to bring in more visible aspects of the livability framework and our goals into the project improvements. Next slide. So this is a lot. Please, you have this in your email. There's a link in the chat. This is for reference. I do not expect you to digest this today. This is something you can have to retain and look at and refer to, as both we're looking through the options and into the future. The following slides will have technical details that, again, I'm introducing today, but you will see again, and we will have time to talk about. I will walk through the identified path forward for each alternative, and we understand that a matrix is a lot to take in. It summarizes a complex analysis and topics into very short taglines. So we also included an explanation of the evaluation criteria, and we have links for that as well. So I'll start our discussion with the alternatives that we identified as retained. These will be the alternatives that we are recommending move into the tier 1 EIS. Thank you. So there are 2 lists. The first list is a full list of the alternatives that MnDOT and FHWA has identified as being retained. MnDOT and FHWA have retained the alternatives in the first list because most of them generally address the purpose and need. They have fewer impacts to important social, economic, and environmental resources, and they provide opportunities for incorporating goals and livability items. While the no-build option is required to move forward as the baseline for future comparison, these alternatives all improve safety and comfort of pedestrians and motorists, improve pavement and bridge condition, improve mobility, and provide transit benefits through access and travel time. In addition, these alternatives show a unique ability to advance the project goals and the livability priorities expressed by the community, while improving air quality and negative impacts to environmental justice communities around the corridor. There are still some challenges in areas with these alternatives, and we will continue to explore them. So again, I'll go through these one-on-one real quick. The no build, do nothing, as we talked about, is required to be retained. We keep this in, and it serves as the baseline for comparing all other alternatives. Maintenance B, as you recall, is adding that transit shoulder west of Highway 280. We are recommending to retain maintenance B. It doesn't have any red items in the matrix, as you would see. There may be some improvements compared to the no build, but it is still a question whether all the need items can be fully addressed. We would reconstruct pavement and bridges, which really creates that opportunity to improve crossings and connections for people walking and biking. We would provide that transit benefit through the whole corridor with a transit-worthy shoulder, and that would improve mobility for transit users. And widened shoulders can also provide safety benefits. There are no major impacts to social, economic, or environmental resources. And there's some opportunity to advance project goals, but we'll continue to look at that. We are also recommending retaining the reduced freeway alternative. All 4 project needs are addressed. There are some concerns with mobility impacts and further studies needed. So I'll show on the next slide. We have some displacement of traffic to the local roadway network. This will result in more traffic on the local system. Based on the expected crash comparison, this alternative would address the number and severity of crashes. So those fatal and serious injuries are really what we look at for crashes for people overall. There are no major concerns related to social, economic, or environmental resources with a mix of potential benefits and impacts. There's some concern around air quality and noise just due to displaced traffic on local streets. I will note for alternatives that have center running transit lines, when we start to talk about 3 bus rapid transit stations, that one of those bus rapid transit stations, we do have concerns about right-of-way impacts, and that impacting either having to take homes or businesses in order to build that transit station. There's also opportunity to advance several project goals. This is the smallest of all the alternatives, so there's a greater opportunity to advance sense of place and public health and environment through the use of potential excess right-of-way due to the reduced roadway footprint. Next slide. So we'll be looking at some maps. I'm probably going to go through these pretty quickly. I would spend a little bit more time on them. These will be coming up online. So again, there will be time to see these and look at these. This is the regional look at the impacts if we were to put in a reduced freeway, so that smaller freeway footprint. I-94 in 2045, so we're talking about 2045, would probably be about 170,000 vehicles per day. When we look, you'd take away probably 40 to 50,000 of those vehicles. Some of them would reroute regionally, as we're showing here. So you can see those trips going pretty much where expected. You go down 35E, 36, some on 494 and 694. Next slide. This shows the impact to the local system. So same alternative. We're still looking at the reduced freeway. We've taken away about 21% of the trips on the freeway. Some of them, as we showed at the last PAC meeting, a lot of the places people want to be or start from are here. So there's a lot of land uses that people are going to or starting from that create the traffic that need to be in this area. So trips that need to reroute regionally or can reroute regionally do, the rest of them come onto the local system. There are marginal increases, some concerning. We looked at Lake Street. That bridge wants to carry an additional about 4,000 trips a day. Washington Avenue, which currently carries about 4,800 trips a day, would need to increase about 2,000 trips per day. So we do have some concerns, but we know at this stage that we have to take a closer look to really understand where folks are going in the model. Next slide. So that's part of what we did. We did a sensitivity analysis. We took away an additional 30% of traffic. We understand that traffic models are not perfect. So we took an additional third. And we really just focused in on the river crossings. Again, I mentioned that before. That is a pinch point. Our network is not connected at every intersection, particularly at the river crossings. So with the reduced freeway, about 142,000 vehicles remain on that.
Samantha? We'll move to John S. John Sheehan. Next up is Griffin D.
Hi.
Griffin, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We
Yes,
can.
we can hear
Go
you.
ahead.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I'd like to introduce myself. I was born in Minneapolis, mostly raised in the eastern suburb of Stillwater, Minnesota. And I'm a civil engineer graduate from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. I think it's very strange that on MnDOT's own website on ArcGIS, it says that there's 150,000 daily trips on I-94. And just looking at BRT by the United States Department of Transportation, a BRT exclusive right-of-way can hold 30,000 trips per hour per direction. So if you divide that entire, assuming like you could literally get every single person on one BRT line, and in 5 hours, you can move the entire daily demand. Obviously, that won't happen. That's a conservative example, but furthermore, it was stated that there's no roadway that has 38,000 daily trips in the Twin Cities, which is not true. Hiawatha Avenue, also on MnDOT's own website, says it has 35,000 trips.
Griffin, we've reached the end of your allotted time. Thank you for your comment. We'll move to Olivia. Olivia M. Okay, we'll move to Jeffrey Z. Jeffrey. If you're having issues coming off mute, please raise your hand. Next up is Alexander J. Alexander. Alexander J. Julie H. Julie H. Next on the list is Arthur F. Arthur.
Hi.
Hi, Arthur. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I was also given at the beginning of this said that I would have 2 minutes to speak, so I don't appreciate being downgraded. I wanted to say that the best way that we can increase mobility along the corridor is increased transit, and also that I don't know where this idea of less safety is coming from, because obviously cars are going a lot faster, so there will be more severe crashes. And there's a number of cities that don't have as many highway connections that have removed connections successfully. So I think we should be considering that.
Arthur, thank you for your comment. We're at the end. Next up is Tom T. Tom T. How about Kelsey T? Kelsey? Not seeing Kelsey. Next up is Olga L. Olga L. Next up is John H. John H. And the last in this grouping is Carla H. Carla H. Carla, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Carla Hovde. I'm just a Minneapolis resident. I don't have any fancy talking points. I just want the boulevard option to move forward. I just want our community to become more climate resilient for our future climate crisis. We have to build a radically different system that is not reliant on private car travel. We have to move forward with the at-grade boulevard option and the ideals it represents. And I just want to say I've never been part of a meeting or comment process like this where the vision presented and the desires of the elected officials and the public are so mismatched. MnDOT has clearly failed to present a compelling vision for why the preferred plans are the best, and I hope MnDOT folks leave this meeting with that thought niggling at the back of your mind. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. All right, next up is Calvin. We received an email that he's no longer able to speak, so we will move to Connor H. Connor H. Connor, if you're having issues, please raise your hand. We'll move to Douglas C. Douglas.
Hello, can you hear me?
We got you, Douglas. Go ahead.
All right, so to members of the Department of Transportation, you claim to care about community input, our health, our environment, but your decision-making process does not seem to reflect any of this to me. We should not put the needs of the freight shipping industry, thank you for chiming in earlier, we should not give that greater weight than the health of communities along our corridor. We have to reject a process that weighs economic interests over people's health and our climate. There's no amount of money that we can take that can pay off the costs that we are incurring with our current transportation system. Charles Zell, you said that MnDOT would never build that kind of monstrosity again a year before starting the process to rebuild it. Same monstrosity in the same place. Your highway system is still built on the backs of our most vulnerable. It still runs through sacrifice zones with higher cancer risk and lower life expectancy. Rebuilding I-94 will perpetuate these harms and accelerate climate change for another 70 years. If you continue on the path you've laid out today, dismissing options to rethink I-94 without full consideration, your successors will soon be apologizing for you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. All right, next up is Rob Davis. Rob D. We'll move to Taylor H. Taylor H. Reminder, if you're experiencing issues coming off mute, please raise your hand. We can come back to you. Next up is Riley Davis. Riley D.
Riley, you are unmuted.
Riley, it sounds like you have the floor. Are you able to speak? We might not be able to hear you, Riley. We will come back to you. Thank you. Next up is Eric N. Eric N. Let's try Michael C. Michael, go ahead.
Thank you, Ryan. I would just like to echo the comments that have been made by several members of the community here. In that, MnDOT needs to consider when there's this wide of a gulf between what you think are the best options to move forward and what your community thinks are the best options to move forward. That's a fundamental error in your methodology, in your analysis, in your data. That many people can't be that wrong. And in addition to that, again, we talked about this was a 60-year-old mistake that you right now have the opportunity to fix. And I would just encourage you, back then, they didn't know about climate change. We do. And to not consider at grade and all of those implications is something that you're going to have to live with if you do not widen your timeline and understand that the current systems are not sustainable. Thank you.
Riley, I'm going to try to unmute you again. It looks like you've accepted the unmute, Riley. But we're unable to hear you. Okay. Sorry, Riley. We can try again. What's Ryan doing?
Sorry, technical difficulties. I was on mute. Let's try to go to next up on the list is, I believe, is Tony Z. Tony Z. Okay, let's go to Tony LaRose. Tony LaRose. And next up is Reno T. Reno T. Go
Hi,
ahead,
can y'all
Reno.
hear me?
We got you.
All right. Hi, my name is Reno Taylor. I live in Minneapolis. I wanted to speak today I am someone who owns and drives a car in the Twin Cities. I also use public transit and bike. As a car owner, I just want to state that I am fully in support of the at-grade boulevard options for rethinking I-94. As someone who owns a car, I'm frequently trying to navigate having to unnecessarily get on a freeway that runs through our city. And so I think that if we eliminate the at-grade boulevard options at this stage or any stage, we're just squandering an opportunity to be a leader for urban redevelopment that actually is good for a city and good for the people that live there. This is a city, not a parking lot. The people should come first. I also want to echo what many of my neighbors and community members have said, that we were promised 2 minutes. I know I signed up to give comment on December 22nd. If there was this much capacity, I feel like we could have been given notice of the reduced time earlier. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Let's go to the next comment is Kyle B. Let's go to Brooke B. Looks like you're potentially getting ready here.
Hello,
Go ahead, Brooke. Yep.
My name is Brooke Bartholomew. I'm a co-chair of the Twin Cities Democratic Socialists of America, and I'm also a registered nurse in the state of Minnesota. I worked as a pediatric cardiac ICU nurse for 7 years, and I'm going to talk a little bit about public health. I support the boulevard. Did you know that 1 in 100 babies is born every year with congenital heart disease? It's the most common birth defect in the world. It's a structural change to the heart that can be fatal. Increasingly, evidence has been linking air pollution to congenital heart disease. And again, that is 1 in 100 babies. Air pollution from freeways can affect babies in utero. Also, evidence is starting to show that exposure to air pollution, like what comes from freeways, can even start impacting you before conception. Again, 1 in 100 babies is born with a congenital heart defect. I-94 is an endless stream of air pollution, full stop. MnDOT cannot continue to deny that this air pollution that is linked to congenital heart disease is also
Thank
linked
you for
to
your
climate
comment.
change.
We're at a minute. Thank you. All right, next up is Emma R. Emma? Okay, we'll move to Victor. Victor. Next up is Gabby L.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sweet. All right. My name is Gabby. I live near I-94 with my wife and baby. I shouldn't need to be here wasting my parental leave, yet here I am. I was a participant for MnDOT's outreach for community voices. I was interviewed last spring and randomly heard back end of December that they need to get my approval through ASAP. I didn't get an explanation as to what the goal was with publishing my story if they were removing the at-grade options for 3 weeks of having to repeatedly email the staff to get a straight answer. TLDR, my experience does not impact the outcome and that it's just to share publicly. I've lived within half a mile of I-94 since 2022. I wanted to live in St. Paul and have now lived in Frogtown and Merriam Park. We recently had a baby and I will not stay and allow him to be exposed to the long-term negative health and social effects of simply existing along the corridor. We want wide sidewalks, protected bike lanes, and BRT to get around the city that a traffic consultant's model from Cypress, Texas would not share. We have health, climate, economic, and transportation goals that will continue to be impossible if you go along with the status quo. Please keep the at-grade options on the table. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment, Gabby. Next up is Suze Worley. Okay, next up is Nicholas G.
Hi, can you hear me?
We have you, Nicholas. Go ahead.
Hello, and thank you for listening. I'm Nicholas. I'm a Minneapolis resident, and I've come to speak in support of the boulevard options. I'm concerned that MnDOT plans to remove that option this early in the process. We are coming into a time of change for our country and world. With the LA fires still raging, they highlight the climate emergency that we all are feeling and will continue to. In Minnesota, the sector with the most CO2 emissions is transportation. We need bold changes in order to bring those CO2 emissions down. Keeping the highway in the status quo is not a bold enough move when we know that the status quo is what gave us climate change in the first place. MnDOT has acknowledged the harm that putting the highway in originally caused. This is our chance to right those past wrongs and reconnect multiple communities along the corridor and give them new life. This is a chance to do something special for the Twin Cities and set us apart and above other cities in the region and country. I hope that you take in all the comments that you have received. Please keep studying the at-grade options. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Nicholas. Next up, we have Jacob Wright. Jacob.
Hey, I don't know, really have much to say. I just really think that Hey, can you hear me?
We have you, Jacob. Go ahead.
I live off I-94, just a few blocks away from it, and I was really excited about the at-grade option. And yeah, I don't have much to say. I just think that it kind of sucks living near a highway, and would be fun to not have to do that anymore. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Jacob. Next up is Nikolai.
Hi, my name is Nikolai Jostep, and I'm a resident of St. Paul. The two at-grade boulevard options need to be further researched and should stay on the table in the next stage of rethinking I-94. Last year, I was a senior in college living about 4 blocks away from I-94 in Merriam Park, and navigating around the highway as a pedestrian and a biker was not a pleasant experience. I would often be talking on the phone on my way to do errands and would have to hang up when nearing the interstate and when crossing the interstate because it was too loud. When I started biking more, I adjusted my travels to avoid crossing the highway at dangerous crossings like that Hamlin Avenue Bridge. These experiences, I bring up these experiences to point out that they don't align with some of the bizarre findings of MnDOT's research to date, which rank the at-grade options as worse for pedestrians and bikers than the no-build options, and which penalize the at-grade options for noise pollution while discounting the noise pollution impact of the current highway. These are not conclusions that any community member that spends any time near the highway would naturally come to. I would also want to echo what some
Nikolai,
other
that's at a
said
minute.
about the cost.
Thank you for your comment. Next up is Lena. Lena Peck. Okay, not seeing Lena. Let's try Riley. Riley D one more time. Riley?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we have you.
Oh, thank God. Oh my God. Okay. My name is Riley Davis. I'm a Christian, a commuter, and a resident of Richfield. In an email that I sent regarding my public comment, I included a link to several articles and reports that I'd like included in the public record. In my view, this meeting and process should aptly be described as technocratic authoritarianism. I'm taking my time to center the residents of Los Angeles, Western North Carolina, and those who've had their lives destroyed by recent natural disasters. And that can be linked to greenhouse gas emissions. In 2023, Minnesota committed itself to reducing its greenhouse gas emissions by 50% from 2005 levels by 2030, and by being carbon neutral by 2050. To take action to mitigate climate chaos, you must not eliminate the at-grade options when rethinking I-94. In the final analysis, a new highway is just as harmful as a new oil pipeline. Business as usual means death for future generations. Be bold, be brave. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next up, Karen A. Karen?
Can you hear me?
Karen, we have you. Go ahead.
Great. My name is Karen Allen. I'm a resident of St. Paul. I live in the Rondo neighborhood within blocks of I-94. I walk my child to her daycare on 94. Her elementary school will be just across the highway. And I take the train that I have to walk to across the highway. And my biggest wish is that myself and my family could live a life free of the traffic, the congestion, the trucks, and I hope that as this process continues, it sounds like we have more months to continue considering, is that the at-grade options will both be considered rigorously, considered with an open mind to really understand what the future of our neighborhood could be. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Lincoln W. Lincoln, you're next.
Hi, my name is Lincoln Wells, and I'm the owner-occupant of a home on Fuller Ave in St. Paul, just 3 blocks north of I-94. I and my neighbors would be the most impacted by the closure of 94 and the 3 years of infill for an at-grade option. However, we all still believe that the at-grade option is the only acceptable option to move forward, which is why it was the most preferred and highest scoring option in MnDOT's own community survey. Keeping the interstate only reinforces the destruction to our environment, our health, and our communities that has been the status quo since I-94 was created. Please keep the at-grade option within this process moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Lincoln. Next up is Nathan D. Nathan.
Hi, I'm a St. Paul resident on the 900 block of St. Anthony. I'm on my porch watching the freeway right now. And I'd like to thank our representatives for supporting our voices here as a part of this PAC. I'd like to say shame on MnDOT and please support the at-grade option. We can do so much better as a city. We're part of cities we can build for the next 100 years. We can rival the cities of Europe in a transportation network. And I'd really like to say, because I've lived here for over 8 years, fuck cars. Thank you.
Next comment is Tim K. Tim. Tim? Please raise your hand if you're having issues coming off mute, and we can come back to you. Next up is Isabel E. Isabel.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about that apology 60 years ago to the damaged community of Rondo. Let's talk about that apology, because what is the worth of an apology if you're not actively looking to repair those harms today? What is the worth of an apology if those communities that you slashed through, that you destroyed, are still being choked by air pollution? What is the worth of an apology if you are not looking to rebuild those communities and reconnect them? What is the worth of that apology, huh? Are you going to go 60 years into the future when I'm 80 and when our planet is dying and go, oh, I'm so sorry that we did that again? Well, then it would be too late. It would be too late. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity to fix your harms. If apologies mean anything, if your words mean anything, then you know that you must study and build the at-grade option. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Next is Peyton A. Peyton? Next on the list is Zach G. Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
We have you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Zach. I'm born and raised in the Twin Cities. I'm not sure how we can be rethinking this project area and still keeping enough freeway in an urban core. Highways do not belong in cities. Cities are for people to live, work, and play, and the negative impacts of urban highways contradict that. Highways support objectively bad land usage, create incredible noise pollution, and spew emissions into the air and physically separate people living near them. Countries around the world who have led the way in building cities for people and not cars have come to this conclusion already, and have removed urban freeways by converting them into at-grade boulevards, parks, or transit expansion, often doing a combination of all three of those things. I think that it is very telling that we recognize that building I-94 was a mistake back then, that it harmed and destroyed communities, and yet here we are not proposing to remove the freeway. Commissioner Connolly mentioned earlier that it's one thing to recognize past harm, but part of the apology must be fixing the past harm. We cannot fix that past harm while still having an urban freeway running through our cities. Build the at-grade boulevard. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Zach. Next up is James H. James.
Hi, can you hear me?
James, we have you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is James Henderson. I live in North Minneapolis. I cycle, drive, and ride public transit, and I support the at-grade option. Many others have talked about the negative effects of I-94, but I wanted to add that it isn't even good at moving cars. I frequently make journeys along the corridor, and it's usually faster for me to take alternate routes, even when both ends of the journey are near I-94 exits. An alternate use for the corridor would give additional opportunities for development and wouldn't even significantly affect travel times for people living in Minneapolis and St. Paul. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next up is Zan L. Zan? Moving to Natasha F.
As a current transplant into the Twin Cities Metro from another state, I was frankly horrified when I first moved here by how awful driving on urban highways is. And I often don't make trips across the cities because of the prevalence of highways. Or if I do, I check the avoid highways box on Google Maps. Therefore, I would really like to see further research into the at-grade boulevard options. Additionally, it is clear to me that for the sake of both public health and well-being and the health of the environment, we need to move towards more walkable, bikeable, and public transit-friendly cities. It does not make sense to me that a highway could score higher on a walkability metric than an at-grade option, and nothing I've seen today has made a sufficient argument on this point. Therefore, I believe that further study is needed on this topic and onto the topic of the at-grade options. In particular, the analysis that has been done appears to be wildly biased towards the status quo. Also, I've heard a lot of talk from MnDOT about considering past harms, but not enough about potential future benefits or reparations to the affected communities. An apology.
Natasha, that's a minute. Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker is Carl R. Carl?
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name's Carl. I've lived in the Twin Cities pretty much my entire life, multiple different places. But I don't think I've ever taken the freeway from all the way from Minneapolis to St. Paul. Maybe I take it for a block or two or a mile or two because I'm forced to, but I'm never able to take a better route or take public transportation in that way. I have a couple of bullet points here. I know I was supposed to get 2 minutes, but now I only have one. The minimal research done up to this point doesn't make any sense. The expanded the expanded highway option is listed as better for bikers and pedestrians than the at-grade option. How is that even possible? The at-grade option deserves comprehensive research. The at-grade option, even in MnDOT's own community survey, had the most interest and the most support. Minneapolis has passed a resolution to support the highway removal. And if we're rethinking I-94, let's actually rethink it, not just redo it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next up is Ethan Knight. Ethan.
Hi, can you hear me?
We have you, Ethan. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I live in Minneapolis. I'm a fourth generation Minneapolitan. I'm also an engineer, so I'm just going to come at this from a numbers point of view. You say that 7,000 people will ride transit a day between Minneapolis and St. Paul, yet the Orange Line is supposed to carry 11,000 between Minneapolis and the Mall of America. Also, your crash data says that conceivably lowering speed of cars is going to increase in more deadly accidents. This has been called out by the city of Minneapolis, but I don't think these numbers add up. And I think it's really imperative that as engineers, MnDOT goes back and takes a look at their numbers, because this does not seem like good work. So I'm for the boulevard. I'd like to see it studied, but more so, I think MnDOT needs to just do a better job overall.
Thank you for your comment. Next up is Cameron C. Cameron. Okay, moving to Carter. Carter B. Please raise your hand if you're experiencing issues. Next is Jesse L. Jesse L. Next is Michelle M. Michelle,
Can you hear me?
we have you. Go ahead.
Michelle Molstead, St. Paul, Ward 1. I too am a little discombobulated because when I signed up, I saw MnDOT's request for the 2-minute speaker limit. In short, and noting that 2024 was the hottest year on record, I do still have a few thoughts. I've heard MnDOT say, "I hear you" during this meeting, and I do suspect we might have different ideas about what that means. I support retaining the at-grade alternatives. I'm a Minnesota resident and taxpayer, and I'm really grateful for our elected officials' engagement at this meeting. I agree with them about process and data issues. Robust data, when it isn't quality, is not helpful. Finally, if there's nothing without trucking, as I've heard today, I just wait until you hear what there is without clean air, which I think we already know. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Next is Thomas S. Thomas. We'll move to Josiah. Josiah G. Moving to Logan. Logan K. We'll move to Caden W. Caden. Please raise your hand if you're experiencing issues. Next is Derek E. Derek E. Next on the list is Eric F. Eric F. Next on the list is Kathy M. Do we have Kathy M? Next is Connor S. Connor.
Can you hear me?
We have you. Go ahead, Connor.
Hi, thanks. This is Connor. And I'm a Minneapolis resident. And I'm also going to be a new parent in May. And it's been my hope that my newborn will be growing up in a world where our leaders were trying to make the world a better place and right the wrongs of the past, or at the very, very, very least, trying to keep thinking about it. And by removing the at-grade options from even consideration, which are the only ones that are able to move us in the right direction on the climate emergency and the only ones that will stop poisoning environmental justice communities, I will be forced to tell my newborn that instead our leaders kept the bar firmly in hell. Please change your mind, keep the at-grade options, and stop actively trying to make the world worse. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Connor. Next is Eleanor, Eleanor B. Eleanor B. How about Grace B? Grace. Next on the list is Coleman B. Coleman. Next on the list is JF.
The button. That's me. Can you hear me?
We got you, Jay.
Awesome. Good afternoon. My name is Jay Fanning. I live in St. Paul, about a block from I-94. I come to you as a member of the younger generation, but the freeway is a relic of an older generation. It stands to this day as a gigantic monument to the values of its time. We've heard a lot about past harms today, but the road is still there. It perpetuates the harm of its creation into the present, and any decision to rebuild or expand the highway is a guarantee to continue that harm. If it fails to consider either of the at-grade options, that is exactly the promise MnDOT is making. I urge you today to think not only in terms of traffic models and matrices of evaluation criteria, but also in terms of the longer timescale of generations. The status quo, which prioritizes car mobility, commits us to continued emissions and climate change. But if it can rise to the occasion, MnDOT has a chance to build a road that will make future generations happier, healthier, and more equitable. That's the future I want.
Thanks for your comment. Thank you for your comment, Jay. Next up is Xander, Xander H. The floor is yours. Go ahead.
Am I muted?
We can hear you.
My name is Xander Hodek, and I live in the Twin Cities metro area. I'm asking MnDOT to reinstate the at-grade boulevard options to be considered in the next phase of the selection process. When doing research about the decision, the biggest thing that stood out to me was how disingenuous MnDOT has been in their selection process. Their categories to assess the quality of each option are completely arbitrary and car-centric, and leave out many key factors such as environmental impact and racial justice. When Chair Charles Zelli apologized to the Rondo neighborhood 10 years ago, he said about I-94, quote, "We would never, we could never build that kind of atrocity today." By removing the only non-freeway option from the Rethinking I-94, we are damning ourselves to rebuild that same atrocity Chair Charles Zelli apologized for. Does MnDOT really not care about the communities who were displaced by I-94? Do you not care about the devastating environmental impact that a freeway will perpetuate? If you remove the boulevard options and the only options left are to rebuild the same highway with minor alterations, then you aren't really rethinking much of anything, are you?
Thank you for your comment. Thank you for your comment, Xander. We will move to Raquel. Raquel S. Next is Alex A.
Can you hear me?
Alex, we have you. Go ahead.
Great. First off, I'd like to say it's shameful to promise 2-minute public comment periods and then shift to 1 minute at the start of comments. This is especially impacts folks that spend a lot of time crafting their message. And further, you just sent an email out from MnDOT talking about this meeting as it's already over, not including our public comments. And that's pretty shameful and poor timing that the meeting is ongoing, yet you've already sent out a summary of today's meeting. I would like to advocate for the at-grade A and B alternatives to move forward, including special considerations toward land bridges as a hybrid approach to add in the benefits of other alternatives. I also agree with the concerns raised by the members of the PAC in regards to the flawed analysis of alternatives, including traffic modeling. When a transit mode takes only a couple minutes more but is more comfortable and safe, is this included in the traffic modeling? Also, MnDOT's mission is to connect and serve all people through a safe, equitable, and sustainable transportation system. The conversations today are being framed as commerce versus writing and community injustices and environmental health. Which is more important based on MnDOT's mission and values? Listen to the comments you're hearing today and don't be on the wrong side of history again. Thanks for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you for your comment. Next is Neil C. Neil.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
We have you, Neil.
Great. So I wanted to say, I would really like to see an alternative traffic analysis done with the inclusion of congestion pricing. I think with the recent success in New York City and the fact that that baffled some people who were predicting increased congestion, I think it would be worth considering how that would impact any of these plans. And I would similarly like to point out that you're also foregoing any possibility of a regional rail network being implemented in the future because the spine of such a network would run along this corridor. And so by not including regional rail now, you're foregoing regional rail in the future. Thanks.
Thanks for your comment. We'll move to Owen.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Owen. Go ahead.
All right. I'm a resident of Bloomington, but as a student at the U of M, I consider Minneapolis my second home. I urge MnDOT to continue considering an at-grade boulevard options for I-94. An at-grade boulevard would be an asset to the Twin Cities for the previously mentioned benefits from elected officials and members of the public. I hope MnDOT understands this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I hope as I grow older, I will be able to bring my future spouse and children to a prosperous street where people want to be. I hope MnDOT in the years to come won't be making the same pointless apology to the people who live along I-94. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Owen. We'll move to Joseph W.
Can you hear me clearly?
We can. Go ahead.
All right, very good. Well, thank you everyone for your efforts so far. I think we really have to ask the fundamental question, whom is this project really for? And I believe that if you get rid of the boulevard option, it really does not account for the people that live, work, and play in the vicinity of this corridor. If we really want to make the cities more safe and livable, we need to keep this option on the table. You know, there are other options other ideas we could include, like protected bike intersections, inverting how traffic signals are done to pull traffic further back, so many things. And we really have to think about the shared values that the people of this area have and how we can bring them back together. So I ask again, whom is this project for? The people of this area, or is it just the cars that they drive and the status quo? Because there is such an opportunity for generational change to be able to right the wrongs of the past.
Thanks for your comment. Next up, I believe it's Arlen R. It could be a typo. Lynn R. We'll move to Joel Campbell. Joel C.
Hello, that's me. Can you hear me all right?
We can.
Okay, cool. My name is Joel Campbell, and I'm a resident of Minneapolis and a student of urban and regional planning at UMN. I want to offer my perspective as someone who's currently studying in the field. I only have a minute, so I have to keep this brief. To be frank, MnDOT committed an act of racist violence against the people along the I-94 corridor
when they first constructed the highway. I know that you're all well aware of what your agency has done to the Rondo community. You constantly say it was a mistake. The absolute minimum that MnDOT can do to begin to repair this harm is properly consider the boulevard option that the people clearly want. As someone who has been researching transit equity since high school, it's bizarre that an institution claiming to be committed to racial justice could act this way. Understand that if you continue to doggedly enforce the status quo, you are directly, personally strengthening a white supremacist power structure responsible for the racial inequity that highway construction and operation causes. So I really hope you start taking this seriously.
Thank you for your comment. Next up is Till K. Till? We'll move to Christina. Christina W.
Hi, Christina. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Christina Nguyen, Twin Cities GSA member and concerned Minnesotan. Paris, France had success removing highways which improved their climate and improved their economy and increased standard of living. Pay attention to the overwhelming consensus and comments today spoken against the highway for outgrade option. But let's keep it real. MnDOT decided what they were doing regardless of concerns raised today. MnDOT is using outdated models to focus on trucking lobbyists and out-of-town suburbanites who don't even live here. It's a shame MnDOT is not listening to the citizens who pay taxes of the salaries who MnDOT is supposed to work for. Cars are not people. I hope out of concern for the future of Twin Cities, MnDOT changes their mind, choose public transit and other at-grade options for the public good. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next, we have Stephanie B.
My name is Stephanie Marie Booker, and I live a mile and a half away from a trash burner, 1 block away from Minnesota State Highway 55, and a mile away from where Highway 55 meets I-94. All these things have a cumulative effect on the health of my neighborhood, zip code 55411, which has the highest asthma hospitalization rate in the state. The profane geography of my neighborhood is no accident, and it's certainly no mistake. It is environmental racism and classism that led to a trash burner being built here, to what was once 6th Street being turned into the polluting and hazardous to pedestrians Highway 55, and what led Interstate 94 to tear apart and destroying neighborhoods from Rondo and St. Paul all the way to my home in North Minneapolis. It is time to put an end to the crimes of neighborhood destruction, pollution deaths, pedestrian deaths, bicycles deaths, and quality of life caused by these urban highways and interstates. Now is the time to start with changing the interstate between downtown Minneapolis and St. Paul into Twin Cities Boulevard. And the fact that MnDOT is considering maintaining and expanding in the face of global climate change, caused in large part by emissions from automobiles, looks like the state agency not only doesn't care about the health and welfare of citizens.
Thank you for your comment, Stephanie. Thank you. Next comment is Madeline L.
Yes, hello. Yes. I'm an engineer and an urban planning student. I've been biking to school in Cedar Riverside for 3 years now. I just want to say this is the first of the meetings, PAC meetings that I've been to, and I've been infuriated by the process concerns raised by our representatives and council members. How can you say that you've considered environmental justice, air quality, the climate, and the generational impacts of this highway and the community input represented by all these comments here, and still reject the at-grade options? You say you have a responsibility to consider the needs of those nearby, so act like it and be different. Change this process and consider the at-grade alternatives. The best time to remove the highway would be 50 years ago, but the second best time is now, so let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next is John L. Go ahead, John.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
You can, go ahead.
Hi, I'll just start by saying that I'm incredibly proud of the city, county, and legislative leaders who have spoken up so clearly during this meeting, asking for a better process and better outcomes of the project. I'll also say I'm incredibly disappointed with the leaders of MnDOT and Metropolitan Council and their lack of vision for what the future of this region could be. They're doubling down on a failed urban policy when we really have the opportunity to truly, genuinely rethink not just this corridor, but the entire core of our region. They've had the chance to, during this project, ask for change. These leaders could have asked for more comprehensive person of need. They could have asked hard questions about the models. As Alex noted way at the beginning, these are flawed models that fail to consider long-term impacts of transportation network changes. The decisions being made here are enormous and will guide the shape of our region for generations. I really encourage us to pause this work, start with a vision for the future where we really want to go, and then to figure out how to do this right. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next is Jerry C. Jerry C. Next is Nolan B. Nolan? If you're experiencing issues, please raise your hand. Next is Parker S. Parker S. Next.
Oh, sorry. It looks like Parker is unmuted, but we are unable to hear them. Do you want to try again, Parker? Okay, I see you unmuted again, and we can't. Let me mute you on my end, and then we'll unmute again. Okay, try again. Okay, we'll come back to you and let you test that out. We'll come back. Okay.
Thank you, Parker. We'll come back. Next up is Sean Hayford or O'Leary. Sean.
Thank you. You can hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you. I am a city council member in Richfield, but I am just speaking here today as an individual resident to share our regional point of view. I'm opposed to the at-grade proposal, but I am strongly in support of the reduced freeway options. I've been an advocate for transportation safety in the Twin Cities for over a decade. I have a master's in urban planning. I was a board member and contributor at streets.min. And as a city council member, I was the only vote against municipal consent to widen 494 in my own city. And so I agree with the arguments that 94 in its current form is harmful, but removing the freeway and replacing it with an at-grade boulevard would be even worse. It would increase car traffic on important pedestrian corridors, and it would replace safe grade separation with high-risk, high-volume traffic signals. The reduced freeway options can reduce emissions, improve mass transit, and reduce the footprint of the freeway. I encourage you to move forward with those and integrate some of the best ideas of at-grade, like vacating excess right-of-way for redevelopment. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next is Nahid Khan. Nahid? We'll move to Jesse M. Jesse.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We got you. Go ahead.
Great. Want to thank my elected officials, Representative Senator Murren, Commissioner Connolly, for their comments and support a lot of what they said, share a lot of the anger that some of the folks here are sharing. And I want to respond to what I heard from the presentation as one of the key points arguing against the at-grade options, which is hearing that there are just a lot of people who want to move from east to west in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, and that going at-grade would displace a lot of those trips out of the freeway into streets in Minneapolis-St. Paul. And I just want to ask, like, isn't the challenge of moving people laterally through a relatively dense area without a huge car funnel kind of the challenge of our moment? I mean, in a climate crisis, in a housing crisis where we need to use land really efficiently and build more housing, isn't that kind of the whole game? So, like, if we're giving up on being able to move those people across a relatively dense area without huge car funnels, we're giving up on any meaningful mitigation of the transportation sector of fighting climate change.
Jesse, thank you for your comment.
Upsetting.
Thank you. Our next comment is from Josh K. Josh.
Hey, I'm here. So we know every highway system, with every highway system, as population and demand grow, the highway becomes unsustainable and causes slower trips. During a recent evening rush hour, I had to drive from downtown Minneapolis to Midway in St. Paul. Google indicated it would be quicker to take University instead of 94. It demonstrated to me that 94 is already failing to meet transportation needs. For this section of 94, the concentration of pollution in a population-dense area creates a health risk. We need to think about long-term. I'd like to see the at-grade option considered in research going forward while coordinating additional solutions like improved free mass transit.
Thank you for your comment. Next on the list is Eric B. Eric B.
Test.
Parker, are you with Eric?
I'm not, but I
Okay.
got my mic working. I'll be quick.
Great. Okay, perfect.
Thank you very much for the time. Thank you for the opportunity to weigh in on this plan. I reviewed the mission statement of Minnesota Department of Transportation. For the audience, I'll reiterate it now. Connect and serve all people through a safe, equitable, and sustainable transportation system. I believe this is something we can do, and I believe an at-grade roadway is our way forward to achieve this. That solution provides the best opportunity to create a transportation system that is safe, equitable, and sustainable. It is not an overstatement to say that we are out of time to create a solution that hits on these climate goals, as well as we are long overdue for creating a much more equitable solution. I'd like to see an at-grade roadway be reviewed and, if possible, implemented. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next is Noel Nix. Noel?
Ryan, it's Noel Nix in this case.
Thank you. Is Noel on? Okay. We'll move to Patrick M.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, go ahead.
Right, I'm Patrick, a resident of Lyndhurst in Minneapolis. Mr. Lindeberg's Zoom background of the Golden Gate Bridge reminds me of a time that San Francisco removed a freeway about 3 miles away from that bridge. Minneapolis will never have an earthquake that decimates I-94 like the '89 quake did to the Embarcadero Freeway, but this removal showed the resiliency and ability of the society to adapt to new norms. The freewayless Embarcadero is now a thriving area of walking, rolling, and transit with renewed economic vitality. Using capacity and volume as an elimination criteria ignores the capacity of the community to adapt to the new normal, and I strongly disagree with this approach. We need to be bold and courageous to build the transportation system of the future, which meets our climate and public health goals. Do not dismiss the at-grade options. Thank you for providing an opportunity to speak.
Thank you for your comment. Next, Joe H. Joe H. Okay, we'll move to Paul N.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Nelson, and I would just like to give a quick comment. Currently, I-94 is a high-speed car-only motorway, and that is a problem. Why car only? There should be a very separate parallel space for non-motorized transport for walk and bicycle, and separating walk from bike. All of the interstate roads and designated highways have been built as car-only roads and car-only high-speed motorways. The at-grade boulevard option certainly includes walk and bicycle, but all of the throughway options in the lower grade trench are all just car-only. The car-only design standard is a mistake. In other words, the through options that are provided on the website could also have at the same grade as the motor vehicle traffic in the trench for walk and bike, well separated with a safe guardrail.
Thank you for your comment, Paul.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
You too. Next up is Perry C.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Thanks, Ryan.
Hi, my name is Perry Cadwallader. I live a snowball's throw away from the highway wall in Prospect Park. I'd like to thank our elected representatives for their advocacy on behalf of the community today. I invite all members of the PAC and MnDOT to host their next meeting in my backyard, where it is too loud to have a conversation due to the highway. During a break in the meeting today, I did some community engagement on my block. I went out and interviewed all of the cars parked on my street. Each car responded, "Why do you care so much about what cars want? We aren't alive." I hope that MnDOT takes that to heart. Cars do not care if they become obsolete, if they were replaced by walking, bicycles, or transit. We should take the cares of the community, we should make the cares of our community, not our cars, the #1 priority, and assess the presented options accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next on the list is Nathaniel K. Nathaniel. Nathaniel K. Okay, moving to Jesse M. Jesse M. Okay, we'll move to Ava A. Ava A. If you're experiencing issues, please raise your hand. We'll move to Tyler B.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
We got you, Tyler. Go ahead.
Great. All right. I just want to thank everyone here at the meeting and who's in attendance for the opportunity to speak and to give public comment. I think it's very important. What I hear coming from MnDOT is an argument that to me rings hollow, and it's a straw man argument. If our goal is to represent the needs of the community, the freeway resides in the community of Rondo. Prioritizing out of region transit when there are other outside of the Beltway options is a false choice, and it presents us with the opportunity exists for us to transform the inside the Beltway network and transform those trips that are typically taken by car between St. Paul and Minneapolis with a much more human-centric design principle, while still allowing for commerce to operate in the region. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and I hope MnDOT does consider these comments going forward.
Thank you, Tyler. Next comment is from Jayon G. Jayon, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Jayon G. We're going to give Nathaniel another chance. It looks like he is on.
Maybe that's a Jason, but the S is missing.
Thank you. That's probably right, Connie.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Hello.
Nathaniel, okay, we have you. Go ahead.
Hi, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm an 81-year-old disabled veteran, lifelong resident of the Rondo community, and my grandma and grandpa's home they were displaced in September 1956. I'm 81 years old, and over the years, we've always wondered when we would get our community back, or a sense of community. We thought it was going to be Selby Avenue, but gentrification took over. And now with the Reconnect Rondo plan, we see hope, not only for myself, but for my children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. And there seems to be a very organized, well-financed effort to squash this project. I don't hear anyone talking about the safety issues of folks walking across this above grade project that they're proposing. I don't hear anyone talking about the cars and trucks that are going to be diverted into the neighborhood that's going to cause additional pollution problems. And I don't hear anyone talking about
Thank you for your comment, Nathan.
Generational.
Thank you for your comment. I believe we left off with Will T.
Yep, can you hear me?
I can. Will, go ahead.
All right. Hi, I'm a Minneapolis resident who supports the continued study of the at-grade option. I'm disappointed by so-called experts who dismiss the concerns of residents. I do research on the optimization of transportation networks. You can't create an accurate model 20 years in the future. MnDOT admits that with their assumptions. So there's no way the model can be used to justify removing the at-grade option. Engineers need to think critically about the assumptions, and MnDOT engineers are not doing that right now. Diving into street-specific capacity while skipping conversations about safety says a lot about MnDOT's priorities. Capacity is not a concern when you add transit or congestion pricing. However, MnDOT did not consider either of these since bus rapid transit is already happening before this project breaks ground. And the repeated dismissiveness and condescending behavior that the project director showed my elected officials was disrespectful. Minnesota is known for leading the way in our country, and this project should be no different. We can invest in our future, we can right or wrong, we can be a transit leader. That's who we are as Minnesotans. But as the public comments of many Minnesotans are showing, MnDOT is not representing us. That needs to change. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next up is Lily E.
Hi, folks. My name's Lily Eggers. It seems possible that entirely unplanned, I'm delivering some kind of public comment closing remarks. But MnDOT and PAC members, thanks for your time, and I hope you can appreciate the time that over 100 people took in waiting 3, 4, 5 hours and not even getting to show their face just to lodge a comment for 1 minute. Now, I have great respect for the Reconnect Rondo team, but MnDOT only seems to be willing to communicate with public groups or to use models that reinforce and confirm their existing institutional beliefs. Their models unrealistically demonize the at-grade options and refuse to consider broader shifts in public transit use or planning. I-94, MnDOT seems to be committed not to rethinking, but instead just rewording I-94 in its assumptions, preferences, and its public-facing actions. So, PAC members, I urge you to consider, are we truly rethinking I-94? If we're just moving things around, if we're just changing the words a little bit, we are not doing our part to the people, not the cars, the people of the Twin Cities and beyond. Thank you for your time.
Lily, thank you for your comment. That wraps up the public comment period. Thank you to everyone who took the time to provide comments today. As a reminder, for those that either didn't get a chance to speak due to technical issues or would prefer to send or email your comments to the department, you can. You can email them to rethinkingi94project.dot@state.mn.us. And with that, I'll hand it over to the commissioner.
Thank you, Ryan, and just thank you all for participating today and hanging in there to wait for your turn to comment. I know it was a long time, and I really appreciate all those who made the time today. We'll be sure to keep you up to date on the alternatives analysis as it continues to move forward. And of course, any PAC members, again, who have questions, would like to discuss this project in more detail, we are more than happy to arrange that. So as we noted at the beginning of the meeting, the time went likely well after we had anticipated when we first set up the meeting. And again, thank you so much to all for who hung in there today and your time and your comments. Hope everyone has a good weekend.